What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Myco Geeky Podcast, a podcast that goes deep so you can level up your at-home mycology game. My name is Myco Geeky. I am a little bit, and tonight I'm going to be a lot bit. We are going to go nerd out and geek out and really get into it. We all love it. We know why we love it. We're going to find out what it's actually doing. I'm talking about psilocybin on the brain. Tonight we're going to sit down and learn, hopefully quite a bit, maybe reaffirm some things that we anecdotally think we know. We're going to find out some of the science behind it, about what the stuff is doing, why it's so great, why is it curing this, why is it solving addiction problems, why is it making people happier, why does microdosing make me able to focus better and control my mood better. We're going to get into all the potential neural pathways and science about what's actually going on in these brains of ours. But first, I just want to give a quick shout out. Love all my mods in my Discord. The Discord's growing, getting a little bit bigger, getting a little feistier in there from time to time. And I just want to thank everybody that I have moderating in there. You guys help keep it sane, keep it focused on mycology, keep it fun, keep it, the no gatekeeping, no, just friendly and supportive in there. So I appreciate you guys. I want to give a shout out to all my Patreon supporters. I think I'm over 30, stabilized a little bit. That's okay. We're going to keep bringing better and better podcasts, and you guys are going to feel more and more compelled to help me out. And one of these days, we're going to just do some crazy podcasts. We're going to go to Africa. We're going to shoot to the moon. We're going to do some stuff nobody's doing, because I'm not going to give up. We're going to keep doing this. Anyway, tonight, I am pleased to welcome, you know what, I should probably read the bio, though I'm sure you guys already did. This guy I happened to meet on one of my socials, and we hit it off right off the bat. It's a cool guy. Also happens to be a retired brain surgeon. You know, my last job was not brain surgery. This guy's was. He is, let me get into it here. Besides being a retired brain surgeon, Dr. Rick is one of the first physicians in the world to complete his Master's of Science degree in Medical Cannabis Sciences and Therapeutics from the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. His extensive experience with traumatic brain injuries makes him uniquely passionate and qualified to champion a new path into experimental and promising new therapies that utilize cannabis and psilocybin-containing mushrooms. Yeah, he's a special guy. He's a unique figure in this world that we're in, of cube lovers and cannabis lovers, and he is just professionally and clinically experienced, and I cannot wait to see all the things that he continues to do and champion for our community. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Dr. Rick. Otherwise, the full name, you guys will earn a credential just for saying this name. Get ready. Dr. Louise Enrique Liogier-Weyback.
Hey, what's up, man?
I did it. I said your name. Woohoo! Yes.
So,
I feel accomplished. All right, man. Let me pull up this overlay. There we go, guys. Louis Enrique. He did it with like a rolled R. I can't do it. It's okay.
Rick is much easier.
Dr. Rick. I can hear it now. Paging Dr. Rick, neuroconsult to the ED. Dr. Rick to the ED, please. I can hear it now.
Usually the way I can tell when someone's trying to get my name is when they say, "Can I please see?" And I go, "Yep, that's me."
Or just the pause, just the...
Yeah, it's usually that.
Dr. Oh, that's me. I'm exactly. Dr. Pause. Okay. Hey.
Oh man, well, thank you for having me on. Honestly, it's I've been waiting a while to do this, so I'm excited.
I am very excited. I always celebrate. So one of the things I talk to a lot of people about is that if we want the world to take what we truly believe in and are passionate about seriously, we got to act serious. We got to act respectable. We got to be ethical. We, have to deserve that attention. And so having people like you, retired brain surgeons, never hurt. I mean, if I say psilocybin is great, people can go, screw you, man. I don't care what you think. If a brain surgeon says, hold the phone, buddy, I have a few things you might be interested in, that goes a long way. And so you and some of these guys that are doing these cutting edge, like the John Hopkins long-term studies that are going on, I mean, all this stuff, I can't tell you every night when I go to bed, I don't believe in God, but I pray to just the universe. And I'm just like, thank you for these people, because these people are going to solve some major social problems in the coming years. So,
well, frankly speaking, the only reason that any of us are able to do any of the work that we're able to do today is really because of the community like this that keeps things alive. So it may sound hokey, but it's 100% real when I say that not only as a person that lives in this space, but as a patient. I've had 13 concussions. I've had a lot of PTSD, and this is by far the best therapy I've ever found for me personally.
You are not the first person to say that. I happen to know another physician in the space who also is a combat vet, and he said, man, I was losing my vet buddies, and he said then finally after one ayahuasca ceremony, it spread like wildfire, and he's like, I'm ready to quit my day job to do this because it's so transformative. So I believe it. I've experienced it. I know you have, and you are uniquely positioned to really affect some important change. So we thank you for your presence for sure, as much as you thank us for ours.
No. So let's get down to it, man.
Let's do it, man.
Let's talk about
this guy
stuff.
put together a pretty impressive PowerPoint. So can you pull it up? You loaded it up, I think, right? Okay, great.
Yeah,
you're in total control, man. Oh, I might have to put it on the screen. Hold on. All right, yeah, I think I have to pull it on the screen, and you can, once it's on there, you can control it. There we go.
All right, perfect. So, yeah, so really what he and I have been talking about for a couple of weeks is really what kind of direction we want to take with this, because I'm sure as anyone that has done even cursory reading, this is kind of a really big field. And one of the reasons that it's so attractive to me and most other researchers, I think, is the brain is still very much a black box, and there's a ton that we don't know about it. So for as much as we do know about it, realistically, there are orders of magnitude that we don't know. And that's some of the stuff that we're actually going to get into in here. So,
and that's exciting. That's scary and exciting. That's great.
It is. I see it as a giant opportunity, not only to discover cool stuff and make cool stuff, but really just being able to understand why I make some of the decisions that I make, why I react in certain ways. It's something that my understanding today, and this is not an exaggeration, is almost completely different from 5 years ago when I was still operating. It's absolutely crazy. And I always feel stupid talking about this stuff because I sound like a little kid, but I really do think it's magical. It's the stuff that we can accomplish between the ears. Yep. So it's really cool. Just quick disclosure. I only have one disclosure. I am on the board of directors for Mr. Psychedelic Law. It's a nonprofit that functions to bring about education and decriminalization in Florida. So you guys can support us. So we're going to do this military style. So anybody that's ever been in the military is going to know exactly what I'm going to say. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. Then I'm going to tell you that thing. And then I'm going to tell you that I just told you that thing. It's a good way to learn.
So I'm waiting to be told what I just got told.
So first, what we're going to look at is the neuropharmacology of psilocybin. Really what that means, what we're going to specifically look at is not only what this drug is doing in the brain, but more importantly, what our bodies are doing to the drug. So these are the combined concepts of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. What am I doing to the drug? What is the drug doing to me? Frankly speaking, there's a lot of things that we are only just finding out, like how long does this stuff actually sit in the receptor for? How long is it sitting in my liver for? These are all things that, even though we've been playing around with these compounds for a very long time, we didn't know all these things. So this is a perfect example. This is the original biosynthetic pathway in the fungus for making psilocybin. This is the original pathway from, I believe, 1968, and it looks really straightforward. There's mostly things that I think everyone will recognize, especially, well, let's see, tryptamine, NN-DMT, psilocin, psilocybin. So these are all psychoactive, but more importantly, psychotropic compounds. These are things that not only interact in the brain, but also produce certain stereotypical reactions in the brain.
Right.
Now, taking it one step further, this is the actual pathway. So it's a little bit more complicated. We're not going to go. Yeah, we're not going to. I mean, going through each step is beyond the scope of this talk. But the reason that I wanted to show this pathway is because there are a lot of alkaloids which are present in the fungi that are, typically being grown, and a lot of these alkaloids, these minor alkaloids, are now finally being recognized for their own therapeutic and clinical values. So things like baeocystin, norbaeocystin, norpsilocin, and these are all things that are naturally occurring, all at different concentrations. As an aside, these compounds are one of the big reasons why this academic field is really starting to more recognize that different varieties have different physiologic and psychological effects. Kind of like how different strains on the cannabis side, how all the different terpene profiles produce different effects. So if we take Enigma, for example, Enigma, one of the reasons that it's so favored for folks with really high anxiety and really bad PTSD is because it doesn't produce very much baeocystin. For certain folks, baeocystin is very, very anxiety provoking. So in those patients, that's where Enigma, or just even the fact that I have a different choice of variety, makes a very big difference. Take, for example, ODPE. So that actually has a very high amount of baeocystin and norbaeocystin. That's actually what gives you the tingly niacin feeling, like you've taken a lot of pre-workout. Some folks really like that. And then other folks with other neurologic disorders, like especially neuropathies, really won't like that sensation because that's what their pain feels like. So these aren't just like different flavors. They're really different.
Right.
And
yeah,
we haven't studied any of them.
We have
It's
not.
nuts.
No. I mean, we're really in the Q world here. One of my earlier podcasts was HPLC testing, and that's just starting to happen.
Yeah.
Where people are getting interested in all these alkaloids. Well, what does the alkaloid profile look like? And so you just saying the things you just said, I know you blew my mind a little bit, low key blew it. I know many people listening are like, wait, what did he just say? Did he just, like, I just walked into a dispensary and had the guy just tell me what I need for what I got? And
yeah,
we don't have that yet. So you're already talking my language. I love hearing this stuff.
Well, that's so I'm pretty well established in the cannabis world, and that's really where I focus most of my most of my research, especially once I moved into the industry, it was really a lot of product R&D, and specifically at developing products that are tailored for a specific disease process. So, I worked with a bunch of different companies formulating different terpene profiles in different cannabinoid mixtures. Like for people with MS, people with Parkinson's, people with, diabetic neuropathies.
Right.
And one size does not fit all. Same thing here. This is just something that we're really just starting to understand.
Barely nudging into it, yes.
No, absolutely. And going back to your comment about the HPLC podcast, it still baffles my mind that we as an academic community still don't have actual standards for these compounds. So like when we use an HPLC for pretty much anything else, I can go on the internet, I can go off a bookshelf and pull the standard operating procedures that tell me exactly how to calibrate the machine, right, and how to interpret different tests. So when I get this peak here, I know that it's not my test, it's something new in there. Right. We don't have that for mushrooms.
Oh yeah, George talked about that, saying that he had to develop the protocols for them.
Yeah, and so you get into these situations where you're examining a compound and you see an extra spike, and I don't know if I need to go back and rework my standardization curve, or holy crap, I found something new. Realistically, you're just poking in the dark unless you have a $250,000 mass spectrometer.
Right.
Most of us don't have access to that.
No. I did see one on eBay for 25 grand. Though. I'm just saying, guys.
Jordan from Trip Labs has been pointing me in the right direction.
Yeah.
So shout out Jordan.
If you're talking to Jordan, then he's also telling you that your local university will probably let you borrow theirs for a pretty fair price.
I am. That's one of the things that I'm working on. I'm currently in talks with a few different universities here in Florida about possibly setting up like a Center for Psychedelic Studies. There's a lot of interest, but as soon as you get past the academic level, once it goes to administration, then they all kind of go.
Oh yeah, once the legal team looks it over, they go, Mm-hmm.
All they hear and see is Timothy.
But there's also plenty of people at that level salivating, because I've talked to other people at universities who, I won't name names, but apparently they've already been brought into meetings where they're like, hey, so guys, if you guys are thinking about doing any research on, psychedelics, we'd be cool supporting that. And, we'd like to offer the universities, labs and resources to facilitate that. So they're salivating over, maybe one of our guys can figure something out and make us some money and get us some prestige. And I think we're on the front end of all that starting to cascade and happen real fast.
I hope so. I really hope so. Well, what I think realistically, as with most things, things really won't genuinely start changing until they meaning kind of like the administrators, can connect the science to a dollar sign. And the moment they can say, oh, I can bring in money for the endowment, then you'll probably start seeing more crap moving in.
100%.
It's a terrible thing to think, but it's the truth. And I think most people know that. Anyway.
100%. There's everybody's just waiting for the right people to chill out about the right things, and a lot of other stuff's about to happen. A lot of people ready to spend a lot of money in this space, because what as you're about to get into, what this stuff does is very unique.
Yeah. Well, on that note, this is hepatic elimination. So number one, for the folks that don't know, hepatic just means liver. So all of these compounds are metabolized, transformed, and eliminated through the liver. So what this starts out. So when I orally ingest anything containing psilocybin, what's going to happen is it's going to start breaking down in my stomach acid, but realistically, most of it is not going to do anything until I get into the small intestine. And at that point, it's where the compound can enter what's called the hepatic portal system. That's where all of the blood goes to your liver. That bloodstream is important because not only does it feed the liver, but it distributes it everywhere else. And this is why when you start feeling that come up, it comes on a little bit and then kind of accelerates. That's once it clears the hepatic portal system, starts going everywhere.
Nice.
So what ends up happening is about 80% of the total mass of psilocybin that I've consumed gets immediately targeted for elimination. It's a process called glucuronidation. So essentially your liver attaches, can you see the mouse moving here? All right, so the liver attaches this hexose ring and it turns it into a sugar. This sugar is now very, very water soluble. Immediately, that goes to the kidneys and you just pee it.
Just pee it out.
Exactly. Now, the remaining amount of psilocybin then gets about 10% gets shuttled off to the actual metabolic pathway where you actually get psilocin and breaks it down. But then the rest of it gets turned into this 4-HIAA, the 4-hydroxyindole 3 acetaldehyde. That is the precursor to 2 more elimination species. So at the end of the day, the amount that we actually consume, less than 10% makes it into our bloodstream.
Wow.
Okay.
So for those of us who are microdosing 100 milligrams or 200 milligrams, we're saying we're getting 20 milligrams.
Maybe. Yeah.
10 to 20. Yeah. Wow.
So, but then just flip that thought and just think about how I'm ingesting that small amount and it can produce that big a change.
Yep.
It's crazy. The reason, right here, binding affinity. So binding affinity, this key value, K sub I, what this represents is how tightly this compound binds into the different receptors. And what we have in these...
This is like clinginess factor of a girlfriend, right? This is like...
Exactly.
Really how strong that binding is. Now also the higher number, does that mean the longer it will stay bound to that site?
No, it actually means the opposite. The larger the number, the less affinity it has for that receptor. So the ones where you see over 10,000, it's a logarithmic scale. That's why. Okay. So the ones where you see it's over 10,000, that means that psilocybin doesn't even really touch that receptor at all.
Okay.
So this is where we get the notion of a classic psychedelic. So a classic psychedelic, another proper term for it is a serotonergic psychedelic. So these are compounds that stimulate and produce their effects primarily through the serotonin receptor, 5-HT2A. Gotcha. That being said, it is not the only receptor subtype that they hit, as you can see here.
I see.
This brings us to one of the points that you and I have been talking about pretty thoroughly, is this notion that, like cannabinoids, folks are inappropriately associating the fact that psilocybin binds so well to my serotonin receptor that means that serotonin receptor was made for psilocybin. It's just not true. Right. I would love it to be true, but it's really not. It's a very anthropocentric thought.
I remember telling a patient one time something about the endocannabinoid system. And they were like, wait, you mean to tell me that we're supposed to have this? And I was like, no, it's not quite like that. But yeah, so
I wish.
that name is, I know you want it to be true. I've heard
Yeah.
many a podcaster want to make that to be true, but right, this is just structures, just molecular structures that happen to fit, like following basic
Correct.
chemical principles. Yeah.
Correct.
And then do
when
cool things.
And when you get down to it, and you see, so it brings the majority of, or almost all of its action through the 2A subreceptor, right?
Okay.
Well, when you look at it, it actually has much better binding affinity for other receptor subtypes.
Yeah, I'm looking like 2B looks better, right? If the lower number's better, then what's up with 5-HT7, man?
Exactly.
All the action should be there. Why is it not?
So what we're thinking and what we're seeing is that while the 2A receptor stimulation gives us all the psychedelic effects, a lot of the anti-inflammatory effects are driven by these other receptor subtypes.
Oh.
Also by what we call intermediary cell signaling. So it stimulates a receptor, that receptor does something, and then it gives you the action.
So we're sitting over here thinking about, like, all the people in this Cube community right now who are really, who don't mind watching a 3-hour podcast. A lot of talk about alkaloids, a lot of talk about, it's not just about psilocin, it's not just about psilocybin, there's we got baeocystin, we got norbaeocystin, we got all this other stuff. But it's not even just that. Now it's the other receptors. Mm-hmm. So you got all the various alkaloid, from tryptophan all the way to psilocybin. Now you got multiple receptor sites that are potentially doing different things in the brain. Boom.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we don't know, we need to be spending big money figuring this all out. I
agree with you. Now, what's a really cool thing, so for the longest time, we, meaning the academic community, has separated classical psychedelics from empathogens, so MDMA, or dissociatives like ketamine. But now that we're really starting to focus on the cellular biology of these compounds, now we're starting to see that I didn't include the figures in here just because we already had a little bit too much, but there was a fantastic study that was looking at functional MRI and the default mode network activation, deactivation using MDMA and comparing it to classical psychedelics. In theory, the working hypothesis prior to imaging was that we really shouldn't see the same type of activation. We should see a distinct set of activating centers and deactivating centers on psilocybin and psilocin, and we should have distinct other centers for MDMA. Turns out MDMA also suppresses the default mode network in a fashion very similar to psilocybin. So
that means, like a pharmacist, right? Pharmacology thinking goes, well, it's a different class. It's working a different way, so it shouldn't be affecting a similar process in the brain. But what you're saying is it's having the same effect on the default network.
And the reason for it, we're just finding this out, is when you pull up the binding affinities of MDMA, it shows very similar binding affinities to the serotonin receptors as psilocybin and psilocin.
Wow.
So that's why it's producing that. We didn't know that before. We thought that it was just good for, releasing oxytocin and helping with that end of like PTSD therapy.
Right.
But now we're finding out, oh my God, we can still promote a lot of the same changes, long-lasting changes that we do with psilocybin. And FYI, if you guys are wondering, like, what is this default mode network we're talking about, we're going to get there. I promise.
Right. Now, can I ask you a question real quickly?
Please.
So I'm imagining, so I know a little bit about binding sites as a non-chemist and a non-doctor. So I hear all the time in in the clinical setting, we hear about, the ACE2 receptors, we hear about this receptor, that receptor, and then we hear about drugs that we figured out will bind to them. It is binding it kind of like unlocking a process, or is binding more like when you get a massage and the masseuse hits that spot you need to hit and you're just like, oh yeah, that's what I needed right there. Like, or are there multiple results from a drug molecule binding
All
to
of
a
the
site?
above.
Any of that can be true. Okay.
It depends on the receptor.
Right. Okay.
So I'll give you a perfect example. So back to cannabis, the CB1 and CB2 receptors.
Mm-hmm.
So CB1, that's the receptor that mediates the effects that we typically associate with feeling high, right? So if I stimulate that receptor, I will feel high and I'll get everything that I associate with that. Well, THC is a partial agonist, meaning it only partially binds to CB1 and CB2. Okay. Well, there is, let's say this is the binding site. What we have is a second binding site that THC cannot use, but CBD can use. That's called allosteric modulation. So this binding site has this conformation, but the moment CBD is plugged in, it changes its conformation.
Right.
Yes, these are not static molecules. Proteins
right, they change their shapes,
Yeah.
They're big proteins or they're big, right.
And that's really what we're looking at represented on this slide here. This was a really cool study because back to what I was talking about, we see that the different compounds which we didn't think worked through these signaling mechanisms actually do. So when you look, this is a busy slide, but look down at the bottom right. So these are two different receptor types that are interacting with LSD, DOI, which is a methamphetamine analog, and psilocin. They're all stimulating at roughly the same pattern. There are different levels of intensity, different binding affinities, but they all stimulate at the same level. Okay. So, in other words, this is a lot of what I'm working on personally, is what happens when you combine different substances. Right. This is the same thing as pulling out a different strain, a different variety. We are now stimulating receptors in ways that we didn't anticipate. So there's a lot of really potential benefit from things that we never associated as clinical, like hippie flipping, candy flipping, things that we only used to do at festivals and be like, okay, well, that's just a really good time. And actually, it turns out that it can have a synergistic effect in therapy. So these are things that we aren't even anticipating. It's so exciting.
And when you did the thing about that, when something binds, it actually changes that receptor structure, or at least its morphology. It has me thinking, like, in 50 years, how sophisticated this could be. I mean, I know we all hate big pharma, but at the end of the day, if we get so intelligent about this, you could really subtly tailor things to a really a fine level to where you could be on a certain drug and go, it's good, but I'm still a little edgy, doc. And then they can type some stuff in.
You're starting to understand
that.
Yes.
And then now we're at the future of pharmacology, right? That whole custom made drugs for every person and everybody's needs. And
so
future, dude.
This exact work is being carried out in Fred Barrett's lab at Hopkins. So one of the things that they published on within the last couple of years was a very detailed 3-dimensional model of psilocin in the 5-HT2A receptor. And when it binds, it does change its conformation. The whole reason that you want to study things like that, it doesn't, on its surface, it doesn't seem hugely important, But the issue is if we know the conformation of that protein when a target molecule is bound to it, we know what the binding site looks like, but we can start creating synthetics.
Yeah.
And that's the proposed gold mine. Not from a financial standpoint, from a therapeutic standpoint.
Yeah. Sadly, for other people, from a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
But yes, therapeutically is where we're mostly concerned. I saw that, I think, on a Vice News or a Vice special, where they had said some research facility was like, so we've perfectly modeled the 5T receptor, and now that we know what it looks like, I have AI software that's just now told me that there are 32 million potential synthetic derivatives. Now it's just a matter of figuring out what those all do.
Speaking of AI, check this out. So ChatGPT and the other AI language models, and this is really important, language models. Mm-hmm. One, I think it was, I don't think it was GPT. I believe it was, I can't remember. Anyway, you can write, or you can document protein structure using the alphabet. Because remember, amino acids are 3-letter abbreviations.
Sure.
So what they have done is plugged in the text amino acid sequence of a lot of these proteins and receptors.
Shit.
Put it into the language model.
Right.
And holy cow, this language model was able to replicate evolution over millions of years and build novel functional proteins that don't exist in nature, that mathematically when we plug in the ligand, it works.
That is nuts, dude.
Holy cow, this is nuts.
Forget cloning. Who needs to clone? You just create an absolutely novel creature.
Tissue culture.
Eventually, someday, yeah.
Tissue culture, that's what it is. We're going to grow organs. We're already doing it. We're growing ears and stuff. So. Yeah. And by the way, yes, that is real. We are actually growing ears in petri dishes. So now these, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, partially because it's admittedly kind of hard to see on the screen. But what I really want to show on this is the bold lines, and they're really just kind of in the middle of all these curves. That's the mean, that's the average. So what we're seeing here is an overlay of psilocin serum concentration, so how much psilocin I have in my bloodstream, versus the amount of time I have psychedelic effects. And so what you see, it produces a pretty standard curve. So I just want you to look at the shape of the curve. Then the one that we see underneath is the percentage of 5-HT2A receptors that are occupied by psilocin and the duration of psychedelic effect. So long story short, what we see is that both correlate very closely. The more psilocin you give somebody, the longer that psychedelic effect will be and the more intense it will be. It sounds very basic, and it is, but we didn't know how these things correlated because we have enzymes in our bloodstream like monoamine oxidase. That's one of the things that breaks down, that targets the psilocin metabolites for elimination. They exist all over the place. So sometimes our receptor occupancy rate and our bloodstream concentrations differ. So this is a way of really being able to tell at what dose am I anticipating the effect.
I see.
On this one, now we're actually looking at the other end of the spectrum. Now we're looking at clearance. So from time 0, when I ingest this compound orally, how much of the compound is available in my bloodstream versus how much is targeted for elimination. On the one at the top, if you look at it, the dark circle line, which is the very bottom one, that's the psilocin that's left in your bloodstream available for activation. The vast majority of everything I've ingested is targeted immediately for elimination.
Right.
So this is also really important for folks that have liver disease and renal disease. Because guess what? Folks that have those diseases have to be really careful with how much they ingest. Because it can build up very quickly in your bloodstream and have some very unintended consequences.
Right.
So just think if somebody boofed you. It's not really a good thing.
No. Good call.
Now, last one here, I'm just going to kind of gloss over this, but long story short, what this shows is the overlying effect of blood concentration, receptor occupancy rate, and total amount intake. Bottom line is you see that it's a dose-dependent curve. It's going to be more intense the more you take it. Now, this is where we start getting into the brain stuff, so I'm happy here. So busy slide, but I'm going to walk you through this. So what we see on the left, it's a heat map that is showing the distribution of serotonin receptor density. So the more red the signal is, the more red the color is, the higher the concentration. That's really important because when you're looking at this medial surface of the brain, those hot spots correlate to the areas that are majorly stimulated when you take psychedelics.
And when you say medial, you mean the two halves of the brain. You mean that middle area.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, correct. So we're going to get into it in a minute as far as what these different regions are, but it's a good introduction to show what that kind of looks like. Now, these are some of the proposed mechanisms of action from a therapeutic standpoint. So what actually happens? Well, first off, a current model of cognitive thinking is that taking psychedelics stimulates specifically layer 5 pyramidal neurons. These are in the cortex. This is the gray matter where thought and action is formed.
Okay.
So what we see happen when we take a psychedelic is you see this massive depolarization. All of these nerve cells fire, and then there's rapid firing all at once. So this is not unlike what we see with seizure activity. So seizure activity, you see massive depolarization and what we call propagation of the excitatory signal. So that's, I fire off in one place and then it spreads like wildfire. That's what we're talking about. That's what happens here. It's not just one area. What you'll see in a second is that even just firing off in one area, because of the interconnectedness of this, it goes everywhere.
Okay.
And this is really exciting for therapeutic.
So this layer 5 pyramidal neuron, so are there layer 1, layer 2, layer 3?
Yes.
Okay, so there are multiple layers. Now you're saying this is in gray matter. I know there's also white matter. What is there more of in the brain?
So from a volume perspective, there's more white matter. But in terms of, I mean, both are equally important because you lose one, you lose the brain, right? But in terms of like where thought is actually generated, where movements are generated is in the gray matter.
Okay.
So white matter is what rapidly transmits signal.
Well, as I'm learning as I get older, I mean, it's all gray space. So,
Exactly.
all the real solutions occur in the gray space. So that makes sense.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, if you go to the box above where we were just talking about entropic brain activity. So what this is referring to is at baseline, when you are awake, when you're alert, but not actively focusing on something, you have a baseline background noise, electronic or electric signal. And that's what's being represented by these squiggly lines. Those are MEGs, MEEG tracings. So what happens when I give someone a psychedelic, because of the deactivation in the default mode network, what we see is that part of the brain get quiet, and the other parts of the brain now have to actively engage. So now, instead of having this baseline resting background noise, now we just have everything firing at once. And entropy, a measure of chaos, well, everything's firing, so you have increased entropy. That's what that means.
Okay.
Now, this last part, this is really cool. I'm going to go to the next slide because this is a much better visualization of it. But on the left, what we have represented in different colors are different brain networks. The circles within each of those colors represents nodes. And the heavier the line, the heavier the circle, it means the more solid the connections are to that node. Okay? What I really want you to look at are most of the connections occur within each node. They don't really branch out. So you see light blue mostly connecting with light blue, purple mostly connecting with purple, red mostly connecting with red. Well, what happens when I take a classic psychedelic? Brain connectivity explodes.
Yeah.
And what you see here, everything is connected. But if you start looking closer, and that's really where it's important, you start seeing patterns. These aren't random connections. There are persistent, weighted connections in between different networks. So the purple's connecting with the red frequently. The red's connecting with the yellow frequently. The purple's connecting with the blue and the green, and so on and so on. This is really where this is the visual representation of neuroplasticity. This is the holy grail, at least in my eyes, for psychedelics. This is why it helps with learning disorders, anxiety disorders, eating disorders, traumatic brain injury, subarachnoid hemorrhage, neurodegenerative disorders, because if you can get different parts of the brain to talk to one another, then you can start forming connections. And more importantly, you can leave connections that no longer serve you.
Right.
That's the thing. That's where it really becomes exciting, where now I can take someone that has been punch drunk for years. I work with a bunch of, former NFL players. These guys can't, string 3 sentences together. And now taking mushrooms, taking CBD, doing talk therapy, it's a lot of tools, but the point is they're making progress.
Yeah. I mean, this is sort of the pop culture segue, but I just think about Mike Tyson. And the Mike Tyson I know who just used to chew ears and knock blocks off of people, compared to the Mike Tyson that I interface with now, who's like virtually a Dalai Lama at this point. What I'm seeing on the screen here, I think about old Mike Tyson versus new Mike Tyson, and I'm like, holy crap, that's Mike Tyson did that. He's doing that right now. Yeah. For sure. He's doing that.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
We're going to get into a little bit more detail, but just in a different way. But so just keep this figure in mind, because it really helps to kind of solidify a lot of the concepts. So really what we're going to look at next are exactly why does increasing connectivity, increasing communication actually help. So this stuff is really cool, but it's sometimes a little bit hard to keep track of. So at any point, if you need me to stop or go back, just seriously, just ask.
I might play Columbo at some point.
It's okay. So the way that our brains process information, we have three broad networks and they all talk to each other. When I say networks, FYI, I mean different parts of the brain that act together for a common goal.
Like three different, if it was electronics, it'd be like three different circuit boards.
Exactly. So what happens normally, we have the first network, which is the salient emotion network, SEN, also seen here as salience network. That is the network, or the organized network in the brain that is constantly looking at stuff in my environment and taking information in. A lot of times it's referred to as the scout. It's the thing that is just bird dogging everything around me. It's not necessarily looking and thinking anything's bad or good. It's just reconnaissance. It's just surveillance. So what happens next is a decision point. Either I am going to not focus on something and let my background mind process the information, or I'm going to take that information and do something with it. And that decision point is really where we're going to walk in. So these are really important. So the SEN, the Salience and Emotion Network, the reason that there's emotion in the name is, and a lot of people don't want to hear this, the brain refers to almost everything with an emotional context. Whether it's an emotional thing or not, your brain really doesn't recognize objectivity. Okay? So, as part of this network is the amygdala. The amygdala is the part of the brain that generates fear and anxiety. So this is going to be really important.
I must have a very large amygdala then. Okay.
So I'll actually get into what happens with PTSD, but you're actually not that far off. It actually literally grows. So the amygdala has a lot of heavy connections to the default mode network. So what ends up happening, unless my brain is triggered to make a decision, what's going to happen, let me get back to that. The default mode network is self-referential. This is what tells me what to expect based on previous experiences.
Okay.
So this is the part of the brain that tells me when my partner is, not talking to me and being withdrawn. Well, previous experience has shown me that my previous partners have been cheating on me. Therefore, this partner must be cheating on me. When in reality, it could just be that my partner's sick and hasn't had sleep in, 2 days.
Right.
But that's where we get in trouble.
But that's not what my default network is thinking. It's thinking, watch out.
So that's really it. The default mode network is really set up for defensiveness. This is where I've been hurt in the past, therefore I'm looking out for hurt in the future.
Right.
This plays a huge role when we start talking about PTSD, about chronic pain. Essentially what happens is, let's take chronic pain. Because I have been in pain for so long, yesterday I was in pain, the day before that I was in pain, therefore, I do not have the expectation that I will be out of pain tomorrow. So anything that I encounter is going to be colored by that pain. I'm going to have inappropriate input from the DMN. And so what ends up happening, so instead of the executive control network stepping in and saying, hey, maybe I should get up and go exercise. Hey, maybe I should go see the doctor. Hey, maybe I should try doing something to alleviate my pain. The executive control network then gets pushed off into the background. and now essentially my lizard brain takes over.
Okay, I was about to ask you that question. Is the default mode network basically what everyone refers to when they say the lizard brain? The like.
Not really, but I'm using it colloquially. So
okay.
the lizard brain technically refers to the
brain
medulla.
The brain
Yeah, so
stem,
brain
right?
stem.
Like, yeah. Okay.
So part of the brain stem, it's where autonomic nervous system is really managed. So blood pressure, heart rate, breathing, those things.
But really, when we're talking about it, I think a lot of times we actually aren't talking about I've always said, well, it's the brain stem, but I think what I was really not realizing I was talking about was the default mode network, which is my automatic sort of life-generated instinctive response to things that I'm not using my executive region for. Yeah.
Well, so what's going to happen? Well, first off, I know we're jumping around, but so let's go back to the SEN and look at where it actually is. So we have the anterior insula. The insula is this space here. There's a ton of valuable real estate in the insula. So like when we were going after tumors or aneurysms in this area, this was particularly dangerous because of the real estate there. One slip and you could possibly get into auditory cortex. You could get into Wernicke's area where speech is generated, Broca's area where speech is understood.
And that's why you needed that fancy CAT scan.
Yeah, cortical mapping and all that stuff.
Exactly where you're at. Yep.
Yeah. So what we see, the other parts of it, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. All right, so what this is talking about when we go back here, this area. So
we don't see your pointer, so you got to describe it.
Oh, okay. What you're talking about. So it's the gray area. It's immediately to the front of it where it's green. If you notice that there's or according to this, there's not very many serotonin receptors there. And that plays an important role because in the salience and emotion network, the SCOUT, this is supposed to be objective, right? So we don't want a lot of the serotonin receptors there to overload the emotional part of it. So it kind of makes sense there.
Sure.
But then we start looking at the executive control network. This is the part of my brain that's supposed to step in and make decisions. So
this is like the smarter part of our brains, right?
Exactly. So this is executive control. Exactly. So prefrontal cortex. This is where a lot of our personality comes from. When folks have traumatic brain injury to the frontal cortex, they get what we refer to as frontal. That's where they lose inhibition. They lose that filter. Now all of a sudden, instead of the niceties of normal human etiquette, instead of saying hello, how are you, they go, your nose is huge, you smell bad. They're like, nice to see you too. It's not on purpose, it's just that they've lost that filter. Interestingly enough, this is the area that very often gets injured with head injuries. And it makes sense because if I injure my head, I get frontal, I can't really make a lot of those adult decisions anymore. Okay, that makes sense. This is a really cool representation. This is what's called oh my God. Diffusion tensor imaging. I completely blanked on that. So what this is showing.
I've never heard of this. Okay.
So this is really cool. So the different colored areas are actually tracts. Like if I could zoom in, they're not just blotches of color. They're actually individual lines, and those are the actual connections between different networks. And what you see on the executive control network is that we have a lot of connections to the salient emotion network. So it's supposed to go from SCOUT to objective adult decision. However, because the salient emotion network has such strong ties through the amygdala to the default mode network, very often it gets overridden. This is where psychedelics really make their impact, because they keep the default mode network essentially off so that everything can be functioned properly.
Right.
So,
I love it.
what exactly does this do? So let's actually go back. All right, perfect. So how it's supposed to work normally is I see a threat. If I didn't have any PTSD, that threat would stimulate anxiety and fear. That anxiety and fear would go back to the default mode network, and I would pull from previous data. Oh, anytime I saw that saber-toothed tiger, it ate my cousin. Therefore, I need to be scared of that thing.
Right.
That's an appropriate interaction. An inappropriate interaction is I see a cat. I start getting fear and anxiety, but not because that cat ever ate anybody. It's just because when I was little, I got scared of a cat.
Right.
So now, instead of the default mode network pulling me into I'm scared of that thing, the executive control network can step in and say, oh, that's just a little cat. I don't need to be scared of it. Let me just walk around.
Right.
In PTSD or in chronic pain situations, the amygdala is too big. It's been hypertrophied. It turns out that adrenaline, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, which are released when we're stressed, when we have fight or flight responses,
Right.
make the amygdala get bigger. Cortisol makes the hippocampus, which is necessary for processing of memory, smaller. So now...
Stop it. Holy shit.
It's all one big cycle. It's
Oh
all
my
one
God.
big cycle.
I mean, if your childhood sucks, you're screwed. Yeah, I know, dude.
Mhm.
I know. And if your childhood was great, you're like that car that you wind it up and just there you go. Wow.
It's a lot to take in, but when you see it in motion and you're able to piece some of these pieces together, you're like, holy cow, I'm actually starting to understand why I make some of the decisions I make. It's out of my control.
Yep. And I've been mad at some people from my childhood my whole life, but now I'm really just mad at my default mode network.
Yeah. Well, getting into that, now we start seeing, so now that we have the players, now we can start getting into actual conceptual models of how these things produce the changes that they produce. Okay. So one of the models, it shows, it's called alteration of corticostriatal-thalamocortical loops. It's a mouthful. Essentially, what happens...
It's a loop in and of itself, yeah.
Yes. So these areas... All right, so if you look at the middle row, far left, you see there's barely anything there. And if you see right in the middle, there look like two bulges.
Yep.
Those are the thalami, so the bilateral thalami.
Okay.
What happens through there, almost everything in your brain funnels through the thalamus on both sides. So what we see is that by changing the frequency and the intensity of neuronal firing through the thalamus on both sides, we can change sensory input in different areas of the brain. So we can alter perception. And then this also accounts for the cognitive disturbances that we get because they're hitting the layer 5 pyramidal cells in the cortex. Right. So we hit you with a big serotonin agonist, all of a sudden, my thoughts aren't linear anymore. Right. This is a big advantage of psychedelics. This is why you hear about people throughout history taking LSD and psilocybin and salvia and MDMA for ideation. they'll take it and then just work on stuff because you're following the normal linear pattern of human behavior.
Right.
Now my brain can think, why do I have to go from A to B to C? Why can't I go from C to D to X and back?
Yeah. It's like hip hop, right? You got an MC goes into the studio. He's got to get his mind right before, and I've witnessed it. I ran a recording studio. I watched guys who were okay hit a blunt an hour later doing some pretty sweet, pretty great stuff on the microphone. And I'm like, okay, you did get your mind right for this.
So we'll get into some really funny stuff happens, but long story short, we see very similar decreases in cerebral blood flow when are meditating or sometimes in the zone. We will see some similar alterations as when they take psychedelics.
Wow.
And so that's why folks are able to achieve some of these states without drugs, is because through long practice, they have actually learned to deactivate the default mode network.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Who needs endogenous DMT when you can just meditate for the rest of your life?
Exactly.
Nice.
Well, so that really explains a little bit of why tripping happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this model is really interesting. So this is called the cortical claustral cortical model. So the claustrum is this very small, thin strip of very heavily concentrated 5-HT2A receptors. It's gray matter and it's deep in the brain. It's on the outer portions of what we call the basal ganglia, where a lot of motion is coordinated. Okay. Francis Crick once postulated that the claustrum was the seat of the soul because there was such a high degree of serotonin receptor expression there. And what we see, very interestingly, is the claustrum has extensive connections throughout multiple different networks. And what happens when you fire all of those serotonin receptors, you get massive depolarization and excitation throughout the brain. So what we think happens with this is what's known as disruption of canonical cortical networks. These are the beliefs that are entrenched. And so by changing how the brain networks interact with one another, that's where we can start changing patterns of thought. Again, breaking the dependence on the amygdala.
Just changing the tide, changing the wind. I mean, we always use the kind of like the pathways metaphor or the highways of your brain or the grooves, like in a record, but it's really also like currents. Like
and that's really what they are. And you have it right, because some currents are very easy to step out of. Right. Whereas in other places, you have a rip current that can absolutely just suck you down.
Yes.
And that rip current model, if we want to call it, is essentially what happens when someone has a pathology, PTSD, OCD, bipolar. It's the lines of thought are so entrenched that no amount of psychotherapy, talk therapy, SSRI, mood stabilizer can pull them out of that until you actually deactivate and reorganize everything. So,
gotta reboot.
So this is actually really interesting. What happens? So on the top, what we have, I really want you to focus on the teal bars.
Okay.
So what this is showing is that 1 week after psilocybin ingestion, 1 week, we are still significantly suppressing the activity of the amygdala. A week out. A month out, it reverts back to normal. Okay?
Right.
So this, coupled with what we see on the bottom, remember the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, this is part of the salience and emotion network. This is supposed to be the objective part. What we see is that by taking psilocybin a month out, that part of the brain is functioning better. I am better able to scout things and better able to steer away from the DMN to the ECN. It's pretty cool, right?
I mean, it's beyond cool. Find me one pharmaceutical company that's got a drug that can do this. They don't have one.
There are none.
There are none.
At least not yet.
Well, we know about one. But
yes, exactly.
There are none we can buy at Walgreens for sure.
Well, essentially what we've been kind of skirting around and building towards is one of I think one of the most exciting and probably one of the most widely embraced model of action, and this is what's called rebus. So relaxed beliefs under psychedelics. Anyone that has taken high doses of psychedelics and had appropriate integration, hint, hint, not just for getting high,
right,
will absolutely tell you that what happens with the drug is essentially like defragging your hard drive.
Right.
So in reality, from a decision-making, information processing standpoint, what ends up happening is that these long-held beliefs that were intractable and largely the cause for pathology,
right,
now under psychedelics, we break down that rigid structure. So now the information is not coming from the top down, meaning it's not being influenced by past experiences.
Yeah.
I am now better able to take information as it comes. So going back to this, I increase a month out the objectivity, the functioning,
executive function goes up, better decisions. It makes me think like the default mode network, right? If I'm a deer in the woods, I need a default mode network, right? Because I heard a twig snap and a car hit my child as I walked across the street. If I'm like a lower intelligence animal, default mode network keeps me alive. But if I'm a human being that has a prefrontal cortex and very high executive functioning, that default mode network is not doing me any favors sometimes.
It does and it doesn't. I don't want to completely write it off because
right.
It really
I'm not saying we should get rid of our, but do you know what I mean? Like that is where the defect in thinking can happen.
Exactly. We've modern society, essentially with industrialization and urbanization, we've essentially evolved mostly past the need for it. Until you realize that, yes, humans are still animals and we do horrible things to each other. So that amygdala all of a sudden becomes really important in survival.
Right.
But once you get past that survival stage, that's where it becomes an issue because then you can't shake that.
Yep.
That's why the rebus model really rings true to me, is because once we're stuck in that trauma response, fawn, flight, fight, freeze, it's impossible. I'm talking from experience.
Yeah, I hear you.
You really need something to shake you to your core in order to really build from the bottom up. And that's really what these allow us to do. The reason that these things help with not only psychiatric issues, it also helps with everything. It helps with existential crises. It's what allows us to shake our fear of death that we've held for our entire life. that's a mouthful, you know.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think it's cool. Now, psychiatric stuff aside, now let's actually look into what other things it does. And this is where you and I were talking a lot about TBI. So this is why what do you call it? Classic psychedelics, especially, are so promising in the neurotrauma neurosurgical realm. It's because it promotes so many different things. We're just talking about psilocybin, but as you see on there, this includes DOI, LSD, DMT. MDMA is a very close analog of DOI, so that's why they're using that. These really do help. And one of the things that I hope everyone has noticed when they take mushrooms is your joints hurt a lot less. And that's not in your mind. That's not you feeling subjective drug effects. That's real. The reason for that, they, especially through the TNF alpha suppression, TNF alpha is tumor necrosis factor alpha. It's a cytokine. It's an inflammatory marker. Majorly suppresses release of TNF alpha. Then what we have is a process called neuridogenesis. This is where we have widespread global increase in neuronal growth. That's neuridogenesis. Spinogenesis is where we have increase of dendritic spines. So if you look at the bottom right, this is spinogenesis in action. Just look qualitatively at how many more branches are in each subsequent one. So what happens, VEH is vehicle, that's your control.
Okay.
Well, look what happens when you add DOI, an analog of MDMA, to that neuron. You get more branching. When you add LSD to it, you get more branching. Same thing with the bottom one. You show the same actions. So this isn't bullshit. It's real.
So theoretically, how about traumatic brain injury, ischemic stroke?
Yeah, that's so really anything where there's been neuronal or axonal damage due to the use of classic psychedelics is being looked at to help with these conditions. Number one, from a neuroanatomical standpoint, because it actually promotes these protective factors, but then also from the cellular biology standpoint, where we're promoting neuroplasticity. We're recruiting and encouraging connections between different networks in the brain that don't normally talk to each other. And the idea is, if we do that, then we can recruit different centers of the brain to at least take over partially some of the action of the injured part of the brain. And that's really what we see. I mean, that's why you have, reports of folks that have had neurological deafness for decades, and then they take a whole bunch of doses of psilocybin mushrooms, and now all of a sudden they're hearing certain frequencies.
Wow.
Yeah. Or people that, are blind. All of a sudden, they're not having full sight back, but all of a sudden they're seeing like one color, or they're seeing shades. Shouldn't happen, but it does.
Yeah, that is nuts. But I mean, you can have a trip and you can see sounds and hear colors, and so why not? Now, I have a question that goes along with that.
Please.
I get a lot of questions, and especially once we put this on the schedule, I got quite a few questions pertaining to two things. One, brain injuries as it relates to using psychedelics and a fear of it causing seizures. And then the second question would be, if you were, say, an epileptic, you were on Keppra, can I take Can I microdose? Can I macrodose? Like maybe a basic discussion about some drug classes that might or might not play well with psilocybin.
Yeah. So with regards to the epilepsy question, realistically, there shouldn't be an issue with microdosing. Just simply because the amount you're taking, generally speaking, is not enough to cause, widespread depolarization and sequential recruitment. But that is exactly what will happen when you macrodose. And the fear is that a person with a seizure disorder, especially with a history of grand mal seizures, that you could inadvertently tick off a seizure episode, because that's what a seizure is. It's global depolarization and rapid, sequential fire.
Now, anecdotally, are there stories of this occurring, or is it's just more
there may be. This is one of the downfalls of having had psychedelics, be so stigmatized and sensationalized yeah, exactly. I mean, you know as well as I do, somebody rolls into the ED, and if you don't know right away what they're on, tube them. It's like, well, they really didn't. They were protecting their airway. They were hemodynamically unstable. Just because you didn't want to deal with someone having a panic attack is not a reason to tube them.
Right.
But it happens.
It does.
So, and I mean, to what we've been talking about, like the actual incidence of psychedelic induced psychosis seen in the emergency department is exceedingly rare, but it does happen.
Yeah.
Perfect example, the comedian Shane Moss. He set out to prove that psychedelics don't do anything, and he literally took all of them. This is a great documentary. It's called Psychonaut. And he ended up precipitating his first psychotic episode. He's bipolar now. So, real.
But so let me ask you about this, because my understanding is this. While something like that can trigger your first event, it did not create that condition.
Correct.
That condition is there. It just might have been triggered perhaps a bit earlier than it would have.
Absolutely correct. And it's the same concept with high potency THC and early exposure. It's not going to cause psychosis. It will just, let's say theoretically, I knew that person X would 100% develop a psychotic disorder. Giving them a psychedelic may precipitate it earlier.
Right.
But in a person that we know never had, has no family history of psychosis, has no genetic predisposition, has no environmental factors, it's an exceedingly low incidence that it will happen. At that point, you're just looking at normal, natural randomness. So 1% of the population has schizophrenia.
Okay. That answers that. Now, how about, I got a lot of friends who are on, say, SSRIs or mood stabilizing drugs. Most of these seem to dissipate the effects of psilocybin.
Most, but not all. But yes, you're entirely right. That is one pattern that I have definitely seen, where there are more and more studies that are, granted, they're all small scale studies, but more and more studies where you're seeing trials of different SSRIs, antipsychotics, where they're essentially pre-dosing the subject. The two studies that I'm thinking of specifically, they pre-dosed with sertraline and they pre-dosed with escitalopram, and but they showed different they showed different rates of suppression. So
Okay.
escitalopram, Lexapro, traditionally, that's the one that just kind of kills everything. You have to be off of Lexapro in order for it to get the fire. That being said, newer classes like desvenlafaxine, Prestique, which is an SNRI, you absolutely can trip off of that.
Okay.
So it's not all of them. They're not all created equal, but definitely the older generation up to about Lexapro, you're going to have a really, really hard time.
Okay. It is what it is.
Yeah. Now this, I specifically put this in here because every time I give a talk, so I do a lot of legislative consulting on the cannabis side. And every time that I have been asked to consult as part of my contract, I have a rider in there that specifically states that they have to give me 90 minutes behind closed doors with the legislators so that I can essentially say, yeah, you can pretend all you want outside of these doors that you don't know what drugs do, but you're going to know exactly what they do, and you're going to know exactly how you guys have fucked this up. Right. So as part of that presentation, I always either lead or end with this. And just, this is really important for those of us who are relying on the federal government and state government to have our backs, because sooner or later, you're going to find out what the rest of us found out in the war on drugs, that you can't rely on them. So, do you happen to know, and it's okay if you don't, who John Ehrlichman was?
I do not, no.
Okay, so John Ehrlichman.
Teach me.
In addition to being one of the co-conspirators for Watergate, he is most notably known for being Nixon's chief domestic policy advisor and the architect of the war on drugs. Okay. So he died in 1999. In 96, he gave an all-access interview to Harper's, where he literally told the interviewer, "I'm dying. I'm too old. The government can't do anything to me anymore. Ask me the questions you want to ask me." And they did. Here's his response, quote, "You want to know what this was really all about? The Nixon campaign in '68 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." Right. Don't forget that they are only on the side of control. That's what the war on drugs was. It's just control. So with that, I leave it to you.
Well, thank you so much. We're obviously on the same side here. You are definitely one of us. You are in the community. We are super lucky. I mean, the stuff you just taught me in an hour and 28 minutes, it's so for one, it's validating, because things that I've experienced, things that I've heard literally hundreds of people tell me, but I don't know why. You're now showing me scientific evidence of why those things are the case. Like, why did this guy just have a big trip and then stop smoking? Because he said, you know what, I think I'm done smoking. I'm going to have a big trip. And it just happened. And how? Now I know how. Now I see it. And anyway, it's got me super excited and happy to hear all this stuff.
Exactly. That's just the more I nerd out and dive deeper in, the more excited I get. And it's simultaneously scary and exhilarating, because I really don't think that I've had something in my life that I've gotten continuously excited about.
I'm with you.
And this is one of them.
Feel the same way, 100%. So what do you think? You're talking about working with legislators, and doing like consulting in that realm. So what do you think about, decriminalization versus therapeutic legalization? Do you have
Yeah.
as a clinician, but as a clinician, but also as someone who is in our community, like what's your dream situation?
Truthfully, I don't have one.
Okay, I
I
think I'm ready.
I so I mean, if you can look at it from a few different angles. So from the respect for the organism and respect for its history, decriminalization absolutely makes sense, because at that point you're hopefully cutting out the government who has, systematically brutally suppressed this,
Right.
starting back with the Catholic Church in the 1500s. But at the same time, every single one of us knows just how bad quality control is within this industry. You have folks on the one end, like a really good friend of mine, Triple Fungi, shout out Triple Fungi. He will literally go through and pick out fruits that don't meet his aesthetic and quality standard.
Right.
And then we have on the other side people that are straight up, no scruples about it, just trying to make a buck. Bars that have synthetic DMT in them. It's like it's really hard to argue that decriminalization is the way when that stuff happens. On the other hand, it's really hard to argue for legalization when it amounts to handing control back to these people that we've been trying to wrestle control away from for 80 years. Well, LSD, since the 60s. And it's really hard because look at what's on the cannabis side. I mean, what's really going to happen with legalization? Rich people are going to get richer. And it's going to be damn near impossible. Yeah, it's going to be impossible for the people that actually need the medicine to get it, unless they, participate in criminal activity and grow their own or buy on the black market. And that's why I'm like, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if there is an answer. I'm sure there is one, but can we reach it in this country? I don't know, because we can't really compare, like the Portuguese system or the Scandinavian system to us, because culturally we're diametrically opposed. We just don't have that same, even like a laissez-faire attitude towards it. It's just, we treat drugs as anything having to do with drugs as criminals in this country. And, you take anything like needle exchange programs. One side is going to see it as, yeah, we're trying to save money on the public health side. And the other side is going to see it, no, you're just trying to help these, these bums and people stay high all the time. It's like,
right.
I worry that a lot is going to get lost because of the political environment. And it's not one side is right or the other. It's just that there's just so much animosity that I think one side could tell the other side, look, the sky is blue. We'll go, no, it's not. I'm going to kill you. Right. We just can't talk anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to be Debbie Downer, but I don't know how it doesn't end up it's all about the money. Follow everything.
Yeah, that's entirely what will happen.
Money, so it's got to be that way. I just sat back going, well, you guys do what you're going to do, because theoretically there are some exciting things pharmacologically that could be done that I could never do in my basement. I don't have the money.
Absolutely.
I don't have the expertise. So I am big picture excited about those things. I hate that, some Pfizer families got to get super rich doing it and maybe making ethical decisions. But as long as I can keep doing what I'm doing, I think that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that the day comes where I can talk to whoever I want, wherever I want, whenever I want about it.
Agreed. I think the one major benefit to legalization is forcing the medical community to get on board with it. That would be the really big thing, and it really should start like everything else with education down in medical school.
Yeah,
we don't
they're
get taught
probably
any of
not
this in
getting
medical
too
school.
much. Probably not getting too much of that in medical school.
No,
Yeah.
there was a survey of AAMC, so the American Association of Medical Colleges, AAMC, they're the governing body for all like medical schools in the U.S. and Canada. A survey in 2018 of all curricula showed that less than 9% of all first or second year syllabi even mentioned the word cannabis, let alone taught it.
Oh, I'm
But
sure
just
it's just
mentioned
like
it.
referenced, right? Like nothing.
No. And so psilocybin, I genuinely maybe heard it once in a drugs of abuse lecture.
Right.
And it was like, oh, by the way, these are also drugs of abuse. Move on. That's it.
Yep. Right.
It's crazy, man.
It really is. And so I'll tell you a quick little anecdote about that. So we have a mid-level that works at our ER, and he and I were talking about the Mike Pollan book for a minute, and then there happened to be a med student there that day whose primary clinical area of interest, yes, we were talking about that book. This med student was thinking he wanted to go into psychiatry.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of gets in on our conversation, and it doesn't take too long before me and the other guy, of course, we're hardcore talking about magic mushrooms and how it seems like they're pretty much the new holy grail of pharmacology. And the soon-to-be psychiatrist says, that and SSRIs are why I want to go into psychiatry. He's like, I'm so excited. And I got a little like, did you just say SSRIs? But at least he was also, I know, I'm with you. But he was like, yes, I'm very excited about psychedelic therapy. He's like, my actual dream would be to be integrating psychedelics into my psychiatric practice. And just hearing a young guy say that, I was like, wow, you are not a regular, like, you will be the new psychiatrist. You are not a typical psychiatrist.
I hope so.
That was very exciting for me to hear that, and just to actually have a conversation about it. The attending I was working with, they were just kind of like, yeah, okay, but like, it's just still not, I don't think it's clicked yet. They're not reading the same journal articles you're reading. They're reading articles about, should I use normal saline or lactated ringers, and is this overrated or that overrated. They see it so infrequently, or have never. I mean, I've polled them out of maybe 30 physicians that I routinely see. 2 of them said that they could recall ever really treating somebody who was on mushrooms. So it's so uncommon.
Overall, it's an incredibly safe substance.
Yeah.
Definitely not without its risks.
Right.
But when managed appropriately, it's by far one of, if not the safest drugs on earth. But the big asterisk there, and this is a big push for legalization, is, well, the fact that we have very few complications in a clinical setting really speaks to the fact that, well, it's because we have a lot of resources that can be brought to bear if that person undergoing, that experience has a bad effect. We have the psychologists, we have the social workers, we have the providers, and I think that's one of the biggest. Most people, especially the ones that are just coming to this, don't really understand, is that this is just a tool. It is not a silver bullet. It is not going to fix things. It can absolutely make things worse. The real part of this is everyone always wants to go like, well, what is integration? What does integration mean? That's the part after you're done where you talk to somebody that can help you make sense of it all.
Right.
That's what integration is. That's really where the real work comes in. We can use the psychedelics as a great tool to get me there, but if I don't integrate, I'm not doing anything. Yeah. All I'm doing is making it harder for me to retain thoughts.
Right. It's like, rocket fuel. You need the rocket fuel, but the rocket gets you to the moon, or you can just dump the rocket fuel on your fire pit in the backyard and just blow shit up. Like, it's what you do with it.
I like the second one though.
Yeah, you got to do. Yeah, I do that too.
I'm a pyro.
Yeah. But yeah, you can use this recreationally, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a pretty benign recreational drug, to be honest, if used appropriately and safely. And it can save people's lives. I don't know if I go a day now without hearing somebody tell me a story or seeing a story on Facebook, or it's just, it's like the world's catching up to what we already know.
Well, hopefully they keep running. We want it to get a little bit further.
Yes. Hey man, well, I think we did it. Wow, you're pretty slick. You're like right on time. Slick Dr. Rick. Look at that. I'm impressed. Well, I think we'll have to have you back. We'll have to have you back on to discuss, whenever you feel like you have a tipping point of new research to talk about and stuff like that. While the customary boofing comments were occurring during the podcast, we still got plenty of people were making it very clear how excited and mind-blowing hearing some of this stuff was. So I really appreciate having you on.
Well, I'm very thankful. And honestly, thank you for just giving me the opportunity to talk about something I'm excited about.
Well, like I said, you can bring your enthusiasm over here anytime.
Thanks,
if you guys want to chit chat with Dr. Rick, you can find him on Instagram. I have a link in the description. I have a few links to some sort of related articles and journal articles if you kind of want to dig a little bit deeper in some of the stuff. And then obviously he's referenced a few things as well. So you guys can reach out to him. He also runs down in South Florida. He runs Dr. Jane, which is a medical cannabis. How do you describe it? I don't want to get it wrong. You've got a real slick way of describing it.
Oh, it's a concierge medical cannabis practice.
Concierge. That was the word I knew I was missing. Which is a cool concept, dude. That's right. Like, that's doctors making house calls. I've been saying it for years. That's what I like to see. It's great.
Well, I'm just looking at some of the comments now. I'm glad you guys liked it. And yes, I have tons of Pickle Rick and Tiny Rick stickers all over the place. So
it's hilarious. Cool, man. All right, take care. We're gonna continue this. I think we're gonna get into like some Shulgin hardcore chemistry. We're gonna nerd out here with Ed a little bit further. So if you guys want to keep the nerding going, we can do that. If you guys if you're kind of almost like me right now, where I think I'm gonna need a day just to let all this settle in. Like, I can't tell you how validating hearing the stuff you said was for me. It's pretty awesome. Oh yeah. Like, comment, subscribe. I mean, guys, if you're watching the podcast, just subscribe to it. I don't get it. I got
what's wrong with you?
Tens of thousands of views all the time, and I think I got like 3,000 subscribers. So if you're watching it, just subscribe. You'll find out when another one comes up. Maybe you get too busy. You get trike in your tubs, you're having a nervous breakdown, just get a little notification. Watch a podcast on Monday. It's that easy. All right, guys. So let's once again thank Dr. Weyback. Hopefully we'll have him back on shortly here.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, brother. All right, guys, let me get this overlay off. No ethics tonight. Too much medicine, too much pharmacology, too much psychoactive pathways, all that good stuff. And if you want more, here we go. It's time for deep science, guys. As if we sort of started deep. We're digging like this. We're digging like the second basement now. I'm watching that new what is that new cordyceps zombie TV show on HBO. I can't remember the name. Oh, Just Like Us or something like that. Anyway, the guy's got a basement under his basement. So we're going to that basement now. What's up, Ed?
Hello. It's more like a bedroom.
Second basement.
The fungus is in the other bedroom.
Okay. We'll have to do it in there sometime. Just
Oh,
a bed,
yeah.
I just want you laying in a bed of your crosses, just like a bed of. What are you at, like 80 crosses at this point in the last week?
Yeah, well, I'm working on the F2s and F3s. Now I'm trying to just run some normal stuff, you know, the squirrels need to be restocked once in a while.
Yes.
Like the
squirrels.
they
do
get
it for
hungry
the squirrels, guys.
Yeah, you know, the end of the month they get hungry.
Yeah.
So
I want to pull up. Ed had said, "Hey, you know what? If Dr. Rick's gonna go hard on the psychopharmacology, he's Ed's undergrad was chemical engineering at U of M. He likes molecules is way more than the next guy, to be quite honest. And he said he wanted to kind of get into some TCAL stuff. So I was looking up some Shulgin videos on YouTube, and I found an interview that I was watching. And in the middle of this interview, Alex Shulgin, yes, TCAL. I think I'm saying it wrong. I don't know.
tickle. I've heard it said different ways. I don't know.
Is there really even that many ways to say it? I don't know. We're making it up at this point.
Well, the T stands for tryptamines, but I've heard also people say tryptamines and stuff, so I don't know. So it's tryptamines I have known and loved is the acronym.
I see.
So how do you get tickle? I don't know.
I have no idea. We'll ask him.
I think
on a
he's
DMT
not
trip.
around anymore, I don't think.
Ed, I said on a DMT trip, dude.
Okay.
In the waiting room, I'll put in my request. He'll show up. I'll get an answer.
Okay. Is it gonna be
Anyway.
like Terrence and Albert and everybody's gonna be there? Like
I don't know if they show up. I don't know. But
that would be an interview.
like
That would
Alex
be an
would show
interview,
up.
man. That's your first interview while on the
Yes,
medicine, you
it's
know.
just gone.
Albert Hoffman and Terrence.
Yes.
That you'd get like 5 billion views.
It'd be a fascinating podcast. It'd just be me like quivering and drooling, and then as I come to 8 minutes later, I'd be like, "Oh my God, I just first I met Jesus, and then Anyway, so to piggyback what we just went over, in the middle of this Alex Shulgin interview in like 1996, he made this statement, and I was like, oh my God, this guy in 1996 called it. He already saw it. This is how visionary and important this guy is. So I want to pull this up, and then Ed is going to use his almost unbridled enthusiasm to.
Yes, I've got lists, dude. I've got like 2 post-it pads full already.
Ready to go. All right. So in 1996, Alex Shulgin said, I'm interested now in what works upstairs, meaning the brain, and why it works. Sometimes you have to disrupt something to see how it should work. Sometimes you come across something that is disrupted, or maladjusted, whatever. And these may be tools to reconstruct what has been disrupted for pathological or traumatic reasons. You can go in the direction of trying to repair, help, be a therapist, and interact with others. This is noble. This is a whole profession unto itself. Not mine. What I know in time, there will be a going with therapeutic tools and therapeutic tools to the helping of others. And my art is making those tools. Fucking tearing up hearing that shit, dude. Chemistry making me cry, per usual.
Yeah. Once you get
Because I'm
past the
seeing it
chemistry.
start to happen. It's amazing. So cool.
Yeah, he was definitely, I mean, a lot of people probably that had to stay more in the academic realm couldn't really make statements like that
Yeah.
because of what you guys were talking about. There's this sort of stigma, like you said, with the
Yeah.
pre-med, just some of the things you guys were talking about, I'm going to be thinking about for days. The pre-med students who don't even really understand that you can use cannabis as a medicine, and that like it's even I've got like students that don't realize they're selling weed like at the store on the street where you live. And I'm like, they're like, is weed legal? I'm like, the dispensary right there with the big pot leaf in front of it, like the neon pot leaf. Like, what do you think that is? Like, it's like,
Right.
and when you get to the more kind of the Shulgin stuff, I think you sort of hinted to that. He also saw that these people were going to try to patent stuff.
Yeah.
So he screwed everybody by basically putting them into two big volumes, and now they have a third book called the Shulgin Index, which is basically like mostly it's the phenethylamines like the DOI and the MDMA type stuff,
Okay.
but it's just a list of it's about 4 inches thick, and it's just a list of references and where the compound was
That's
originally
awesome.
like published, its chemical abstract numbers, etc. And he kind of like, I think he was obviously a bit mischievous, and he
Mm-hmm.
was basically like, beep all you guys, like you're not going to patent this because I just published a book that tells you how to make it. Like,
It's my kind of guy, dude. It's my kind of
yeah,
guy.
awesome. When I
Yeah.
first read that, I was blown away. I mean, it's a recipe book. That
Yeah.
Tickle and Pickle or Tickle and Pickle,
Uh-huh.
they are literally recipe books. But you got to know what like THF is,
Right.
tetrahydrofuran, and like what ETOH is, and like things like that. Like they're
Right.
not like what the hell is lithium borohydride, like, and where do I get it? Like it's not like down at the Ace Hardware, lithium aluminum hydride, like not the
No.
kind of thing you pick up at Walmart. Like it's so
I tried to
not your
buy it on Amazon. They didn't have it.
I
Yeah.
I know. I've been trying to get mutagens like EMS on like my local Amazon, and they just don't sell it. I don't know why. Colchicine, I'm trying to get that out of friggin' gout medicine.
Right. Well,
I can get
now,
right.
yeah, now we know you just mix your colchicine with a little psilocybin, and it's a nice cocktail.
I don't know. Maybe if you got gout, I don't know. I was fascinated by the
I thought you said you had
anti-inflammatory.
gout.
I did, but I quit drinking myself to death, so like my
That
gout went
helps.
away.
That's how that
Like,
works.
yeah,
Every time I
don't
got a
eat.
guy come in with gout, I'm always like, "How much do you drink?" I drink a
Yeah.
little. Oh, a little? Like how much, dude? You
Yeah.
look drunk right now.
Oh, like a case of Natty Light. That's all.
Pretty much.
That yeah, just on the weekends. Oh, and Monday through Friday. Yeah. Oh, and Sunday afternoon when I'm watching football.
Just
Um,
days that end with AY. Yeah,
and the months that have 31 days.
yeah. We usually we I don't know, double or triple it. If you say you have a drink a day, we
Yeah.
assume good chance you're having a couple or maybe more. Yeah.
Yeah, the guys on those cops episode, they're like, I had 2 beers like an hour ago. It's like, do you think that cop has not heard that before from
Right.
like every high school kid they've ever pulled
This
over?
was the first time I did it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
never drove intoxicated before. I just
I
can't
mean,
walk, Norm.
dude, now you just got me thinking what a ballsy. I watched another interview the other day with there's like two or three players right now that are, they're sequencing all the genomes, they're trying to find their little real estate in there, or they're just trying to get ahead of the curve so that when things start to go right, they can just be a little ahead. Of course, Pfizer's probably done all this stuff already, just like under the basement under their basement. So like there's no way these little like small companies are not gonna figure anything out before these guys, unfortunately.
Well, they're trying that crystalline psilocybin stuff now and
Yeah,
this amorphous. They're trying to basically make not the chemical itself patented because they can't really do that,
yeah, it's
but the
always a process.
process.
That's all they can
Yeah.
patent. Yeah,
So it's like, you
how
can't
you
make a
make it.
Hershey's chocolate bar, but you can make other chocolate bars, but it's
Right.
not a Hershey's chocolate bar.
Yeah.
Um, like you can buy cola everywhere in the world, but 9 times out of 10 people are still going to reach for the Coke, right? They've spent
Tastes
billions and
better,
billions
dude.
of dollars brainwashing you to recognize that red and white can. I
Yeah,
do the same thing.
I
I'll reach
do.
for a Coke or a
If it
Pepsi.
didn't
I'm
taste
from,
better, I wouldn't drink it though. I'm convinced of that,
yeah,
but
I
it
don't know,
does
that
taste the best.
Pepsi up north, I don't know, that Pepsi's got a that stuff. Don't tell them that down in like Tennessee or Georgia, though. You'll get like stabbed.
Yeah.
Like, I like Pepsi. You commie bastard.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so the tickle, that was an awesome thing, and I think yeah, you should definitely have him back on again.
I'll work on
But
it.
that the thing he was mentioning about the DO, I found it fascinating. The DOI is one of the substituted. It's I can't remember what his diet 2,5-dimethoxy something, and it's got an iodine. That thing is fascinating because back to the kind of pharmaceutical chemistry. DOI is kind of one of these standard. I think it's called the Alexander called it or Sasha he called it the DOB family, and it's just basically these 2,5-dimethoxy substituted phenethylamines, if I get like a little bit. Um,
Okay.
Basically you start taking iodines and bromines and things like that, and you put, say you've got a hydrogen on that little benzene ring, the kind of circle thing. That's
Okay.
called a benzene ring. And you put like an iodine or a bromine, or a lot of the SSRIs, the long lasting SSRIs, they'll have like a fluorine in them,
Okay.
and fluorine doesn't occur naturally in your body. So what happens is when you take they're called analogs. It's basically like a serotonin or a dopamine molecule, and you basically like put a weird atom on it like a fluorine, and your body kind of doesn't metabolize it the
Right.
same way. And so something that, like, say you get a dopamine hit, I don't know, you're like, oh, you just got happy, you ate a piece of cake or you smoke crack or whatever.
Either
You get a
way.
dope Yeah, you get a dopamine hit, and that goes away really quick, right? So you
Right.
need to get another dopamine hit. And so what they figured out, what a fascinating part of pharmacological chemistry is, you put like a fluorine on there and your body's like, I don't recognize that fluorine, and instead of like sticking
It
around for
doesn't
30
jump the gun.
seconds,
Yeah.
yeah, it sticks around for an hour, 2 hours, or
Hmm.
24 hours. And those these like the DOI, the I in that stands for iodine. Your body doesn't really have like iodine attached to normal chemicals. Like, it's
Right.
floating around, and it prevents gout, goiter, and all that stuff. But
Hmm.
like to put an iodine on a molecule, it's a huge like iodine like atom sticking out there, and your body's just like it fits differently into all those 3D like protein kind of receptor things he was showing.
Hmm.
Like, it fits in a little different. So it's almost like you've got like the master key for like, like the 5-HT2A receptor, and then you've got like keys for the little individual like nooks and crannies maybe, and they fit in a little bit different, maybe
Right.
better, maybe worse. I was fascinated by the idea that the evolutionary history of some of these receptors too. And he just kind of, you guys mentioned about like these receptors, cannabinoid receptors, they're not there because we're supposed to be high. Like, like that's a
The
good
guy called them that because that's how they discovered them. Because yeah,
I know, but they were
which is
there.
it was a nice way to honor the molecules that helped him figure this out. But now it's just got a
Yeah.
bunch of guys that like to dab on the weekends. We're like, I'm supposed to be doing this.
Yeah,
Right.
like I got a right hand. I'm supposed to.
Right.
No.
I know.
Okay. Um
I mean,
yeah,
it's
but
great, but don't go telling me that you were this is like right.
it wasn't it
It's probably the wrong name, but what are you
Well,
gonna
that
do?
goes kind of back to this idea that a lot of people have, that nature has some sort of grand design, and it's like, sorry, I don't really think
I don't
there's a
either.
big.
Yeah.
It just kind of happenstance. And when you start looking into these molecules and their ubiquity in nature, like so the tryptamines, which are the basis for like DMT and LSD and psilocybin and all
Right.
the 5-MeO, the
Yep.
bufotenin, all these like tryptamine, they're basically this indole. So for some of you plant people out there, the cannabis people, you'll have heard of IAA, indole acetic acid,
Right.
or IBA, indole butyric acid, IBA. It's a plant hormone. It's an auxin or auxin.
Oxen.
Um, yeah, if you look at the chemical, like if you get a bottle of IAA, if you want to start making DMT, like that would probably be a good place to start.
Hmm.
The problem is IA is quite expensive, and like when we get it in those sprays, like they use it as an herbicide. It like overstimulates the production, and the
Oh.
plant just kind of burns itself out. So like typical dicots, they'll respond quite well to IAA. So, but the concentrations in a typical bottle you would buy at like the, the Walmart garden center are like 0.01% or
Right.
something ridiculous.
You have to buy a lot
So
of
these are,
bottles.
yeah, it wouldn't be economically feasible to use it as a precursor. There's lots of other things like tryptophan, like an amino acid you can buy at GNC. That would be a much better starting place. Like he showed in the metabolic pathway there, the tryptophan. So that brings up supplementation of tryptophan and substrates also, which I tried many years ago.
Uh-huh.
Pointless. But there's metabolic bottlenecks that like kind of prevent the production of more psilocybin. It becomes genetic, right, at a certain point. But yeah, back to the chemistry is fascinating to me, as you can tell. You mentioned the other day the 5-S acetoxy. So we have the normal phosphorylated psilocybin,
Right.
which is psilocin with a phosphate
Silicon.
group, and the ADP, that stands for adenosine diphosphate, and ATP is triphosphate. So
Mm-hmm.
it just switches a phosphate molecule, which is quite common in biochemistry. Now, if you change that phosphate group into a acetoxy group or a acetyl group, which is
Right.
vinegar, it's a two carbon. It's the same thing. You take what would be normally phosphorylated or even dephosphorylated psilocin, and you put this two carbon molecule on where that hydrogen used to be. Then you're extending the effects, and you're also changing the
Wow.
effects because you're just basically it's like way more complicated. I know he wanted to get into it in a lot more detail, but you tweak these little branches on these basic, like it could be an indole, like a tryptophan, like backbone or moiety they sometimes call, and then you tweak that thing, and it can dramatically affect. And that's what Tykel and Peichel, that's what those books are about. They're just basically lists. I think Tykel or Tickle has like 200 different analogs, they call them.
Okay.
And that's what they've been fighting about, like with spice and things like that. I mean, spice generally is the synthetic cannabinoids, but there's another. I think Nixon, what, in '70, he made the Narcotics Control Act or whatever it was called. There was a subsequent act after Mr. Shulgin there. Dr. Shulgin got up to his antics. They were like, oh my gosh, we can't stop this. So they basically made everything that was a tryptamine analog, which is all of the classic
Everything.
psychedelics.
Yeah.
They just made them all illegal, but then they realized that, well, tryptophan is a dietary supplement, and indole acetic acid is a plant hormone,
Right.
plant growth regulator, if you want to call that. So like we can't make those illegal, and then they're still fighting with it because every time they make something illegal, some Chinese chemist is like, hey, today
Add
we're
something
gonna
on
put
the end of something. Yeah.
exactly the same kit. It's like, well, instead of today and hydrogen iodide, I'm gonna use hydrogen bromide. Like it's
Right.
like there you go, bam, oop, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then they don't. That's the scary thing is they don't really know exactly what's gonna happen. They kind of have an
Yep.
idea, and then yeah, you get the zombies, like the
Yeah.
face-eating zombies, not the cordyceps ones,
Mm-hmm.
the Last of Us or whatever. I haven't bothered looking at that more, but yeah, that's I don't know. I could go on, but I'll stop.
I Yeah, man, you named more chemicals than I knew about real
I'm
fast.
sorry. It's hard to
It's
not
good.
use the words.
No, I so here's what I like. I never realized that you could. I always like. I remember looking up one time. I had a lot of patients that would tell me like, "Oh yeah, man, I got off heroin, man. I was on heroin for 8 years. I'm clean now. Oh yeah, when is my methadone due?" And so I was like, man, all these guys that are off heroin are all on methadone. I actually didn't know exactly what methadone was, and I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, it's heroin. I think there's like literally one molecule or one
Yeah,
atom on a fairly inactive chain was different, and
exactly.
other than that, it's oh cool, just some illegal drug company selling you heroin so you don't rob your mother, which is good. That's an improvement. The sad thing is
Ah,
how the people you are incarcerating for that same drug versus now
it's
now
crazy,
rich
man.
people are getting rich off of the same drug that you're demonizing and vilifying. That's my problem with that. And then
Well,
people
some
think they're off heroin.
Yeah.
That's the worst. They actually thought they're off heroin, bro. How can you
Well,
think you're off
that's what
heroin?
they're gonna try to probably corrupt our little our little farmhouse grows to be like, oh, now we've got this pill that you can
Right.
get off your SSRIs that we've been pushing for 50 years or 40 years. And now look, we've got this brand new thing and like you should take this. But for the history people out there, man, you go back to the opium wars of like,
Right.
the late 18 I'm not a big history person, but if you start reading about that stuff, the opium trade and the flow of opium essentially to the West, it's a big, big, big business.
Oh
There's a
yeah.
reason why Bayer like is such a huge, huge company and why they now
Right.
own Monsanto. They've got like more money than we can even imagine.
Yeah.
And these are the people that set up all those trade routes on the old Silk Road and
Yep.
like why we go fight wars in Afghanistan and why we like I
Right.
don't know why are we over there again? Like oh wait,
It's
opium.
just
The strategic reserves, Fort Knox has more codeine in it. This is just I've never been there obviously, but like Fort Knox in Tennessee has more
mhm.
like painkillers than it does gold.
What?
Because painkillers, if you want to keep soldiers fighting, you have to
Right.
medicate them.
Yeah.
If your foot gets blown off, you either have to. So the way you defeat the enemies in war, I'm not really but you don't kill people, you injure them.
Oh yeah.
Because when you injure the soldiers, that means there's three other people that have to take care of them that aren't fighting
100%.
you. You
Yep.
disrupt the supply chain, they can't eat, they can't,
Right.
soldiers fight on a full stomach or whatever. Empty. What did Napoleon or something said about that?
Yep.
Now I'm getting
Well,
into
that's
history.
fascinating. I didn't know that, but I did know that we stockpile a lot of drugs, and also that what you just said
I
rings
don't.
true.
Maybe you do. I don't.
Right.
I don't stockpile.
You know, the U.S. government, not me, not me at all. I wouldn't know anything about that. The but the federal government, the U.S. military, that's what they do to their vets, right? They took that same mentality of painkillers, right?
Mm.
Doing the same thing with their vets. That's well, I mean, for a while. Hopefully, it's better than it was. I think it's a little better than it was, but yeah, it was just here. Just be quiet.
It's crazy well, that's it. If you, I mean, I hate to get all dark, but if you talk to vets, they generally don't want to talk about what they experienced
Right.
because the general public doesn't want to know about it and think about it, and they don't want to relive it. And
Right.
so the way you keep those people quiet is you get them addicted to painkillers and alcohol. And then people can just kind of push them off to the side and be like, "Oh, that guy's effed up. Look,
Yeah.
he's effed up because of, like it's not normal for people to
Right.
go shoot at people with BMG 50s and like
Right.
kill them when they've never met them or don't know why they're killing them." I don't really
Right.
want to get in there, but yeah, it's a
I hear
mess,
you.
man. It's a big mess. But
So do you know? So I didn't realize that those books inspired a whole nother like round of legislation around these
yeah.
drugs. That's
I think it
fascinating.
was in like 84. It was sort of when like Coke was getting really big and the whole crack epidemic. Like I think when Richard Pryor set himself on fire, people started like paying attention, like,
Right.
hey, what is this freebase thing? And then yeah, they didn't know what to do about it, and then Shulgin's books were becoming quite popular. And I mean, they're not like shake and bake meth cooks.
Oh
These are
no.
like
Yeah.
hardcore, like multiple step syntheses that I've seen on YouTube now. There's like some guys like doing actual full cooks, like
Right.
showing you the actual operation and the glassware. I'm like, whoa. But it's well beyond. These are not like first year organic chemistry student
Right.
experiments. These aren't like making banana smells, in a test tube. These are real proper syntheses. Which,
You gotta be a
for
real chemist.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
You gotta
I
be a
mean just
chemist.
the access to some like diethyl ether, things like this, chloroform, like you can't get a hold of these very easily.
Right.
And if you're gonna mess around with the analogs, it's not really economically viable because you can just like grow mushrooms or like harvest DMT from like MHRB, Mimosa hostilis root bark,
Yeah.
or any of the other multiple, plant entheogens that we have available to us. It's not really like, I don't know, you don't really need to do it. If you're a chemist, it might be fun. But it's a lot of kit, man. If your landlord walks in and you got like, a fucking reflux and a heating mantle and like it looks like a meth lab.
Yeah.
Like, my landlord's coming in next week to like kill rats or whatever, and I'm like, I don't know, whatever, man. I'm doing research.
Yeah, you're
Because
a
I sure the hell
mycologist,
ain't.
bro. If
I
anybody's
know
gonna have mushrooms
exactly.
in this house, it better be you.
But I
You
got
could
look
just
a
be
little
like Alan
printout.
Rockefeller down in Mexico, where I remember seeing some picture of where he was like showing the local policia, mushroom gill tissue under a microscope, and then he had like a comment where it was like, if only they knew those were illegal mushrooms. Like, he just inviting them
Well,
over, come look at it, because
that's
they
it.
don't know.
If you don't look suspicious and do suspicious things, people aren't going to be suspicious.
100%.
Like, sorry if you got neck and face tattoos, but like if you're
Gonna
gonna do suspicious things and look suspicious, you're gonna arouse attention.
right.
Like I maybe I don't know, I don't know, but it's like, yeah, just don't look shady and people won't treat you like you're shady, like
Definitely helps. Yes. If shady is your vibe, then if you're
if
giving
that's
off
what
the
you're looking
shady
for,
vibe,
man.
you might get some shade. Yes.
If you want to scare like 4-year-old children, get face tattoos. Like,
Right.
sorry anybody out there who's got them, but like, I
Where
wouldn't, but
Well, I just got in a fight with somebody at work over this who was so we have to get fitted for N95 masks, right? Like these special N95 masks, and our hospital decided they were going to have just a strict, like, you got to be clean shaven. Luckily, I can thin this down and I can pass. But I made some comment like, well, I mean, if you can have a sleeve of tattoos, why can you have that, but I have to shave my beard? And that started a whole fight. But yeah, it's just like 100%.
I don't know.
The way people perceive you is going to affect how they treat you, for sure. Yes.
For better or worse, I currently live in a country where you are 100% judged on your appearance straight away. Your color,
That's
your
everywhere.
gender, your clothing. Yeah, it's everywhere, but in America, people pretend like, oh no, it doesn't matter. People don't care what you look like. That is absolute BS.
I agree.
Everybody looks at everybody else and immediately makes that gut, like, sort of like, oh, this person, like you were talking about the neurobiology. You look at somebody who has neck tattoos and they're scary, right? Like, that means typically that person has been in a very kind of rough upbringing, and maybe
Sure,
they've been to
yeah.
prison, and maybe they're dangerous, and maybe I know a guy, nicest guy in the world. He's got a 3-year-old daughter, and it's a white guy, and he's got a mixed, like, half-Thai daughter, and he walks around and people are looking at him like, oh my God, is he like abducting that child?
Right.
It's like the dude is covered. He's got 2 full sleeves and like neck and face tattoos, and he's walking around with this like 30-pound little Thai girl, and people are just looking at him like, should we help? It's like,
Right.
I don't know, dude. Like I don't know. He's like a crypto guy.
That's our
So
default mode network, dude. Our default
Yeah,
mode network is doing that right there.
like
We
you were
can't help
saying,
it.
this saber-toothed tiger versus a house cat. He's a house cat, but he looks like a saber-toothed tiger. And I don't know,
Right.
whatever. I guess that I know a lot of people got tats. I try to not make too many comments of it, but we're already down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. I don't have any because I'm such an OCD dude. I was like, I knew if I got one,
I'd be thinking there's something on
it'd
me.
be all over.
What the
It'd
fuck
just
is
be
that?
a giant black sleeve all over my
Yeah.
body.
That's why I didn't, because I'm like, man, if I get one, it's like once it's gonna be the whole thing back,
I just know
everything.
how I am.
Plus they get
Become obsessed
expensive.
with them. Yep.
Yeah, just like print t-shirts or something, it might be cheaper. You could change them.
Well, we went from you rattling off some super crazy molecules to we've completely devolved at this point.
Yeah, I was fascinated by his a metaphor about like rearranging the furniture. I've heard that
Mm,
before where you disrupt. I think it was one of the quotes there. I forgot. It was about sort of rearranging or disrupting the furniture in your brain and resetting it maybe in a
right.
better way that suits. Like if you've had traumatic experience as a child, I was quite lucky. I don't think I had, or maybe some of them are repressed. I don't know, but I I I think rearranging the furniture in your brain might be a good
Yeah.
way. And I was fascinated by the conversation about your amygdala getting bigger also,
Me too.
because your amygdala is like literally it's named after an almond, right? So
Right.
it's a little part in the very, very center of your brain that's excruciatingly difficult to study because,
Right.
we don't drill holes in people's heads anymore.
Right.
Well, some people do.
It's like the
But
hippocampus, and yeah, it's all those
mm,
like interior regions that they're
yeah,
there.
it
We
kind of
know
makes
that.
sense that it's on the inside because it's so important. But if you get
Right.
concussions repeatedly and that thing gets, you're,
Yeah.
I still, the people who want to like choose to be punched in the face repeatedly,
Those people are
like I
nuts.
still don't quite understand it. I'm like, oh, like repetitive head injuries or what traumatic
Yeah.
TBIs, traumatic
Yeah.
brain
Yeah.
injuries.
Hmm.
Like I'm not sure what the fascination is with like getting hit in the face over and over and over and over again. Like I used to box when I was younger, and my friend who was about probably 8 inches taller than me and I was like a buck 10, he was probably like 220. The first time he landed full on me, I'm like, okay, I'm done with boxing.
Yeah.
Like this was fun. We used to do like, kung fu karate fights. Like,
Sure.
oh, let's do Bruce Lee. Everybody's watching Bruce Lee and all of a sudden Enter the Dragon. Woo, woo.
And
I'm
then
dating myself.
one lands.
Yeah, you get
You're
knocked in
done.
the jaw, the side of the ear really hard by like a dude who's like double your weight and you're like, "Oh, I don't think I like that."
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
why? I'm gonna try to avoid that. But now it's just
It's our
women that hit
culture.
me.
It's our
I just kept
hyper-masculine
blasting.
culture. That's how you show you're tough. Just get punched a
Exactly.
lot.
See, I get punched by women and I show how masculine I am by having no reaction. Some girl was beating me the other night. I don't know what it is.
What?
What it is I say? I get beat by women constantly.
What?
I wasn't
I
even saying
can't.
she. I don't know why. It started with my mom. So yeah, maybe I do have PTSD. My mom used to slap the shit out of me when I was like a kid. Well,
Yeah.
because I
Well,
talk
you're
back
from
to her.
Michigan too.
Yeah, it's
I
kind of
think that
normal.
was our generation. That was pretty normal. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, we're
Yeah, it
getting in
didn't
trouble.
help.
Wickety what? Is this the
We,
science section? It
oh
was. We're
yeah.
just
Oh yeah.
demonstrating a
Okay.
devolution. We're showing
Mm.
you how we wean off of how psilocybin is metabolized in the hepatic system
Oh
and
yeah.
rapidly and primarily excreted very quickly.
Oh yeah. Through
Sorry,
the
guys.
renal system.
We started off heavy science and we took a right
Yeah.
turn. I don't
It's
know
like
how we
the
did it.
back. It's like flipped over. It's
Yeah.
like.
We
So
the
man,
point
I just ate like
the
10. Had
the
a heroic dose, man. Oh
yeah
man.
we we pretty much we were gonna take a break from the DNA barcoding tonight on purpose. We were just kind of riffing off of the Dr. Rick segment, so it's gonna be a little bit lighter. There's not going to be any homework tonight. If you guys haven't gotten your Mega 11 software downloaded and you haven't watched some
Yeah.
YouTube videos, do that. I've been playing around with that last week. So next week we will be getting back into that, and it's going to be
Mm.
fun.
I might,
Um,
maybe we could try. I'll queue it up on my local computer
yeah,
and
cool.
do like maybe we can do a dry run because yeah,
Yep.
if you guys are downloading it, there's some little maybe you might have to download some extra stuff. I don't know. It depends on your computer.
Okay.
If I think a newer PC is gonna work pretty seamlessly because that's what it's designed for.
Right.
But if you got like a Mac or something, you might have to do some other stuff.
I do. So yeah, I downloaded it on a PC on a different computer.
Mm.
Work better.
That's the PC people. They used to be Mac people. Now they've converted. All the phylogenetic people are PC
Yep,
people.
that was me. So guys, next week we're gonna do some gourmets, primarily gourmets. Though this guy's grown everything. He is young, ambitious, and very talented grower from the East Coast, and we're gonna sit down and talk to him. He is the owner of Microdex Mushrooms. We're gonna sit down with Shay next week. And we also we're going to go behind the veil again. We're going to sit down with James Cruz, and we're going to talk about some of his gateses, his lucid gates and some of his other gates. Definitely a sleeper cultigen, so we're going to get to see some cool pictures and hear the story behind those and in those banging tubs that he's got. And then we're going to continue the ethics segment, I think, with James and Shay, perhaps, and then get back into the barcoding. So it's going to be, we're going to get back into the full segments, multiple guests. They're hard to book, guys. I'm trying my best to, be fully booked. Sometimes it makes sense to have the grower spotlight include, or have that person from the grower spotlight also do other segments. So we'll see. Oh, somebody asked before we go, you want to talk about sclerotia?
Yeah,
People
sure.
be
I
watching
just
your
talked.
videos, Ed.
I guess so, man. I just checked. There's a lot of people. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Like, I'm just kind of popping these things out like in my underwear, and I'm like, oh man, there's a lot of people watching me.
Just keep your balls inside. You're good.
Yeah, I don't want to show a nipple or something on YouTube and
Hmm.
get
I
shut
actually
down.
had a nipple request earlier from you.
I
Someone
you know
said
I
someday.
they're kind of hairy. I don't really know if you guys want to see them. But yeah, the sclerotia, the one I referred to in the video, the Georgia, the one that that down south there, the dirty south.
Hmm.
That one, like, for me, produces like quite like, God, I weighed one of them. It was like over it was almost 200 grams. Like a
What?
big yeah, they
Wow.
if you let them see, one of the things I should have pointed out, I don't want to go into a lot of detail in the videos, but I use rice. Like, I
Hmm.
use the patty rice, which is basically brown rice that still has the hull on it.
Right.
And I gotta put them in CV sub and then let them literally sit in my tent for, those were in there for almost 4 months, one of them. And I just got them sitting next to my other shoe boxes, like, and they just like start erupting. I thought something was
Okay.
wrong, but I've got a tamp that's doing the same thing, and it's trying to fruit, but it's got these really convoluted caps. They almost look like some weird,
Mm.
like, those like plastic balls that you like stick together, like it's like
Oh
a
yeah.
giant Christmas looking ornament thing. Little piece of it looks like that. It's weird, like almost like a little miniature brain, but it's
Now
it's just like
you let these go
vegetative
4
growth.
months.
Yeah,
Don't they
and
get
they do.
just dry as a bone? I harvested mine after 2.5 months because it just seemed dry as a bone. I didn't think it was going anywhere.
That's why I keep them in my tents, because the
Oh,
humidity's quite high. So
okay.
I just leave them uncovered with the shoe boxes, and I just put them on my shelves. I can fit 4 shoe boxes, so I'll just
Okay.
keep them in the back, like on the bottom shelf. They're kind of like out of the way. And as long as they colonize well, they just sit there, and the sclerotia just get bigger and bigger.
Right.
And
Okay.
there is a limit. I think they're limited by maybe the amount of moisture they can sort of physically absorb from the
Mm.
substrate. So there may be like I don't know, I haven't really played with blobs that much, but there are these things where you just like maybe let them sit there and do their thing. And they've fruited. I've got multiple fruit bodies, but they never sporulate. They just kind of, they come up, and
Oh.
then they just, it's the
You don't get
the
those tubs of like the little stringy. Would they usually
no,
have
these will
really
get
tiny
caps.
caps?
Yeah, that's what they do. But the
Hmm.
caps, even if I swab them and look under the microscope, I don't see like any spores. There's not even really any like microscope. I don't see basidia or anything. It's just like this
Right.
weird, like, kind of almost like a chanterelle. They get those weird ridges. Like,
Okay.
they're not really proper gills, and it's mostly, I think, just vegetative growth. I know some of them, if it's really because maybe they're in there for so long, they just get confused and they don't know what to do. I reckon they probably in nature they probably pop up in a day or two, and then they just do their thing, and then they're gone.
Oh,
Like, and their natural environment is out there, in a field somewhere, or maybe with a manure, cow patty type of thing, and they just
right.
come and go, and they just disappear. In a manured field. I'm not sure the ecology. To be honest, my tents are normally full of cube stuff, so I just kind of like stick them in the back. And I don't really have any great advice on how to. I just put them in there. It's just this spawn mixed with CV and just like shove it in the back of the tent. I think
Right.
like I don't really know. Some people say they're nice. I haven't really. I ate I think 30 grams one time of the wet, and it was nice. It's different. It's more that kind of Mexicana vibe where it's like, mm, there's something else there, but you're not really quite sure what it is. Maybe it's that baeocystin or the
Right.
norbaeocystin, there's something else there. I was fascinated, and you guys didn't go into it. The HPLC testing. Maybe I'll have to have another one of those guys on too, because I don't know that. I see ridiculous statements like 7%. Like
Yeah, it's
really?
not true.
I don't think so. Come on. Like
Right.
if you're pushing anything 3% like that, even I'm kind of skeptical.
Right.
I
Well,
don't know.
we got a little something in the works that might address that here shortly. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet, but yeah, that is also a thought and consideration I've had and am having, and we might have something to address that here shortly.
With like the standards too, like how do you get proper standards? I mean, unless you're a fully like I don't know, how do you get.
No, you can get them. So George addressed this in the. You can get a small quantity. You're getting such a small quantity that you'd have to spend $4,000 to trip on them. So he
Yeah,
said that's how they get by. That he goes, he does not have the license for his private HPLC, but you do not need it for the quantity you're buying. I thought
okay.
this too. I thought my initial thought was, how are these guys doing this? How are these guys out west doing
Mm.
this? How is there's another guy out in New York area, New Jersey area that's doing it, and I was like, there's no way they're doing it. Where are they getting their standards? And then when I talked to George, he was like, oh, that's not the hard part. George said the hard part is knowing what the hell to do with them once you got them, because as Dr. Rick was talking about, like, what is your protocol? How there's not a standard protocol for this, so that has to actually be developed as well. Now, if I got a PhD in
Yeah.
biochemistry and I've worked in biochem for 20 years, I probably can figure it all out. And I know there's some people doing it, so there's some other. We're gonna have George back. We're probably gonna have Jordan back and get into some who's using what protocol and talk about that a little bit more, and then talk about some of the
Mm.
stuff we want to get going here. But yeah, I would like to see that and proficiency testing, so that we can at least know, okay, if there's 5 guys doing it, are all 5 guys doing it right? And proficiency testing will show us that.
Ugh,
So
transparency and all that
yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
who's gonna get the next Silo Cup award, and who's gonna
right,
be the number one spore vendor
right.
like or a day after that.
Man, I just talked to a guy
This is like,
who he said that he's working with some guys that are reverse engineering. I'm not going to name the vendor, but a very well known vendor's supposed to be multi spore syringe. And come to find out, in the in the spore syringe, there is also liquid culture, and there are also like vegetable some nutrient additives, and there's also carbon powder so that the spores look clumpier. And I'm like, oh wow. He's like, as soon as we have the results, he's like, I'll let you know. I'm like, no, you can come on the podcast. You guys can talk about all this stuff, because I'm sure people would love to hear about that.
this is all, yeah, I was for a while
Weird.
ordering what was supposed to be multi-spore from a place in Europe that was clearly LC. This was like 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was obvious to me when I got it that it was LC, because
Right.
like you put it on a plate and after 2 days you've got
It's there.
huge
Right.
dikaryotic growth. It's like
Right.
that's not spores.
Right.
And then it's like,
Nobody's
oh,
complaining though.
yeah, these dudes were slick, man. They put a little
Yeah.
QR code on it and all
Right.
this. It said like some shit like white hair gel or something. Like, it was like, wait.
Right.
Yeah, there's ways around all this stuff. As
Tricks of
Yeah,
the
these I think
trade.
a lot of these things are like the HPLC thing. It's a constantly evolving discussion.
Right.
It's not like a static thing that will ever, like a lot of these discussions. Some of these things we talk about as if there's some new thing, like, oh, it's been around for like 20 or 30 years.
Right.
Like the transparency with hybrids and how people make them and what they're called and what F number you should use. This has been going on for 30 years at
Right.
least. So we kind of, it's great that we bring it up to speed and kind of update it a bit, but these are like long-standing sort of debates.
There is no university in the country that is offering a Bachelor of Science in
I
cubensis
know.
cultivation. So we're
Sad.
just putting in the work right now, Ed. We're doing God's work. Because every day we got new people coming in. They don't know anything. They gotta, we're just teaching them.
I know,
Yes.
and
So
it's
the cycle
overwhelming.
continues.
Yeah, totally. I feel like, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but yeah, doing God's a God or the gods works. Like, if there's myco gods out there. Somebody mentioned the other day when they were making sub, like how they think the fungi like talk to them
Hmm.
or communicate with them. And I'm not no hippy dippy, like whatever you call new age person, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, I think I should do this, but I don't know why. And I'll do something, and then like a week later, I'm like, oh, that's why I should have done that. It's like I just had, like, I guess you would call it intuition or whatever,
Yeah.
but it comes with experience. But you can kind of like sometimes like I feel like I'm being guided like by the fungus a little bit.
Hmm.
And I
Been
think
there.
you doing this podcast and getting people together like this and all the people in the chat and commenting, this is the way it's meant to be, I think. Like
I
there's
agree.
no
We're
no two
myceliating.
way. Yeah,
We're just
exactly.
letting our hyphal tips, no terminal branches. We're
Can
looking
you get
for.
herpes through a computer terminal? I don't know.
I do not believe so.
I don't think
No,
so.
I don't think so. I got all my
Well,
shots anyway. I'm good. It's okay.
yeah, I'm okay too. I didn't die from anything yet.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Every day somebody will message me and be like, "Oh, I just found your podcast. This is great." Because in this, I've mentioned this before,
Mm.
but we're just like, we're all little lonely islands doing this, and
Yeah,
so this is great. Just like there are almost no other hobbies that you can do that you can't talk to anybody out at the bar about unless you know them very
mm,
well and have assessed, the
yeah,
whether that's a good call or not. And so this is great.
exactly.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and I mean, some of us are at the level where we're not just like growing things for making a buck. This isn't like a
Yeah,
side hustle for a lot of us. It's like this is
yeah,
like our life now. Like it becomes like not even a hobby. It's like a lifestyle, and it's quite fascinating, but it's hard to find those types of people out there.
yeah. I have
Especially.
people in my Discord who frequently will be like, yeah, the medicine's great, but it's the cultivation practice that yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think still at my core, um, I think most of my content is still very focused on the serious cultivator for sure.
yeah,
I hope
for
to do
sure.
more in the future. I'm hoping to get more into the therapy and integration. I think there's a lot of interest there as well. But for right
Mm.
now, I'm still learning how to do this and building that network up and getting it all going. So we'll get there.
That could be even a whole different channel, or
Right.
that's a whole, like when you start getting into the psychiatry and the psychological stuff, that's like a whole other realm of stuff that I don't know. I
Exactly.
wonder sometimes the just kind of disjunction between the cultivator people and sort of like the medicine people. And
Right.
then there's just like the entrepreneur people
Right.
who just like there's the canopy people, and then there's the like shoebox, like, oh look, I got an albino or I got some weird
Right.
pheno, and like, and then there's like the psychological people who are like, I kind of have a hard time understanding them a little bit,
Right.
like, but that's the main. I mean, if it's gonna go into this sort of like revolution in psychiatry, like those people like kind of maybe need to be involved in the cultivation aspect too, but maybe
I
not
have
if.
somebody who's going to come on. He's a therapist. He's a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, but he is very much excited about the next step where he could integrate, use psychedelics in a therapeutic setting. And he said, I came to cultivation because I I wanted to make sure that the people I was working with were receiving a quality product. The only way I can do that is by growing them myself. It's
Yeah,
where a lot of people are at.
yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know Dr. Rick is the same way. He built relationships in the cannabis industry with super high quality growers, just so that the people he can refer people to quality product that he can count on. He knows how it works, all
Mm.
that kind of stuff. He knows all their terpene profiles, and yeah.
Well, that's it. Like he said, the cultivation itself is therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wonder sometimes when people are like, "Oh, how can I cook grain faster?" or "How can I make my agar grow faster?" I'm like, "Wow, this is like a several month process. Maybe like slow down a little bit."
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know that, the first time I saw my little Amazonians popping out of my weird ghetto like humidity chamber in my desk drawer, like I was like, I need to make more. And then it was like, wait a minute, these things took months for me to get to this point, and I'm gonna be doing this like as a long-term thing.
Right.
So from the psychiatrist, a lot of people, they want quick fixes now for everything.
Right.
They just want
Well,
fixes.
but so
Like,
it is there. It is okay that some people don't like the cultivation, so they are motivated to make it go quickly. I usually tell those people, find a quality grain spawn supplier,
mm,
and you don't have to do any of the hard stuff. Just get a bag
yeah,
and some sub, and,
it's true.
and you're do that a couple times a year, and you're good. But yeah, if you enjoy it, I don't mind. So, for example, I don't always run drippy corn. Um, and I do like that it's faster, but I honestly don't run it just because it's faster. I run it on very specific strains that are very vigorous because I don't know. I just think it's such a miraculous thing to watch just how fast it is. It isn't about speeding the
Mm.
process up, it's about kind of being in awe of how rapid it is. I don't know. Yeah, I don't need anything fast because like every other middle-aged guy that grows mushrooms in his basement, like in 2 seconds you automatically realize that you're never going to run out of mushrooms.
Yeah, after your first mono tub, you're like, oh
Yeah.
wait, now I think the squirrels might want some.
The squirrels need fruit.
Yes.
I remember the first time I fed him to my squirrels, dude. I am not even kidding you. It was what was it? I wanted to say it was DC Mac, but it might have actually been some uh, either Melmac PE or PE uncut. I can't remember what it was now, but anyway, um, I dumped some fruit. I thought like there was maybe a little they were a little bacterial, and so I dumped them out in the yard, and um, literally 2 hours later in the front yard, I've never seen these three squirrels running around so fast and from tree to tree. And then one was jumping up the tree as the other one was jumping down, and they
Oh
actually
gosh.
collided in midair. But they looked
Oh.
happy. They
See,
looked
you
really
need
happy.
study the squirrel black box and a traumatic brain injury and see what's going on. That's probably the
And I
funnest day
mean,
of their lives.
forget my squirrels. Dave Wombat's probably got some of the happiest, most enlightened squirrels on the entire
Jeez.
planet.
I tried making an outdoor bed and with my friend, and we didn't put enough dirt on it basically, and these birds immediately came and started picking the
Oh
grains, and
my
I'm like,
God.
oh my gosh. Now I'm thinking
I'm
about
thinking of
brain like
fly. Can you imagine a
biochemistry.
bird?
I know, I don't know. Would it affect them the same? Well, a lot of these, back to the strains thing, he mentioned, Dr. Rick mentioned a few, like the difference between the strains. If we could
Hmm.
get to that point where we're
That'd be
picking
great.
out alkaloid profiles from different strains like they do cannabis, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. That's a pretty tall order.
I
Especially,
mean, right now, the HPLC, I wouldn't want to use the word it's a novelty, but it is just some type of baseline.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's not like empirical data. You can't just go, I had this tested once, and so this is the potency of this. You would obviously have to
yeah,
be a lot more rigorous, do a lot more testing.
for sure.
But if I'm buying fruit from somebody who's never done it versus somebody who has done it, I'm going to make a bunch of assumptions about quality from someone I get fruit from who has spent the money on HPLC, just because it seems like they want baselines. They want to know, what does my ODP got in it? What does my Melmac have in it? What does my Ghost have
Man.
in it? Right? Like, at least there is a desire to have some sort of information like that.
Yeah, I worry about like in the cannabis industry when I go, I don't know where everybody is in America and what the legal status is, but when I walk into a dispensary here, they've got basically a list that lists
Right.
the CBD and the THC and then maybe a couple of the terpenes in it. And 9 times out of 10, a 20-year-old kid is going to go for the one that has the highest THC.
Right.
I worry about that. That's what I mean, I love to have stronger and stronger stuff, but that sort of chasing after just this number, which could be completely fictitious. Like the HPLC guys were saying, you take a tub and like one tub near the edge, that's at a different, a
Right.
two
Mm-hmm.
different, 2 degrees like temperature difference. Maybe it grew faster, so it's got a more dilute alkaloid
Who
concentration.
knows?
And then you
Right.
got one dead center, one that was on drippy corn or rice or oats, or maybe it was a BRF, the probably the best fruits as far as like potency, at least for the time, were BRF cakes.
Right.
PF Tech cakes that were like multi-spore BRF take. Those like I lived with a bunch of very, very happy people for several months because they were like eating like multi-spore fruits off of BRF cakes, and it's like now you're like, oh wow, we can do this and that, and it's like, well, I don't know.
Right.
Like sometimes they were bigger and more dilute probably than others, and so you get like aborts, if you got like the ghosts, if you get like a tub of like half-inch ghosts, yeah, they're gonna kick your ass.
Right.
No, like,
Right.
but
They're
I don't
gonna.
know. It's so subjective. I don't know that black box that. Oh, he was talking about like my gosh, that's a
Yeah.
big mystery box.
I mean,
And what a
so for sure, the holy grail, at least in this community, in my opinion, and this is why every time someone asks me about extraction, and this is pretty much every day. So we probably
mm,
should do at some point a talk about that, because
yeah,
George has given me some good. Maybe I'll get George and you, and I'll see how many chemists I can get to
mm,
get on here together. You guys can all just talk through what you've done, what you've heard about, what we've read about, and have some ideas. But for me, the holy grail is the dose.
well
The
that's
dose. If you could have an app, like, especially when we're talking about microdosing, I mean, how do you know when they're no good anymore? They're subperceptual. You shouldn't feel it anyway. So theoretically, like, it's an astoundingly subjective idea that you're ever going to know if your microdoses go bad. I didn't buy them
yeah,
from anybody that knows anything. There's no expiration date on them. So, all this
yeah,
information
exactly.
matters. We don't know that. I throw
Yeah,
mine out
that's
after a certain point in time and just go, if I got 100 pills in a bottle 6 months later, I just get rid of those and make another 100, just because I
yeah.
know they're going to last. From what I've heard from all the guys, they're definitely good for 6 months, probably good for a year.
Mm.
But I can tell if I'm using new microdoses versus 6-month old microdoses for sure.
Yeah, the whole preservation thing is a quite active topic about the
Yep.
drying and the
Yep.
storing. I wanted to make a video, but I store mine over like this bed of silica gel, and I
Hmm.
know I thought like after I had these 2-year-old GT, and I thought, oh, I'll eat a gram just to test them out. They were still very, very, very good.
Right.
I was like, whoa, like I thought they might have lost something, but
Right.
they've been cracker dry on silica gel in basically an airtight box, sitting in the dark. And
Right.
I know, like with the quality control that you guys were talking about, if somebody doesn't dry them and store them properly, that
Right.
and those enzymes, all those dephosphorylating enzymes that are going to turn the psilocybin into psilocin, and not to mention you have bacterial enzymes. Like
Right.
if a rotten fruit is sitting on your dehydrator for 3 days or in the sun or in front of a fan, they're going to be
Yep.
garbage. Like people
Right.
will not, for some reason, like, would you do that with normal food? Like, would you take a normal mushroom you're gonna put on your pizza and like let it sit on a windowsill for 4 days and
Right.
then chop it up and put it on your pizza? Like, I don't
No.
understand it.
Now
Yeah, the
I'm the
whole
opposite. I go high heat. I go
yeah,
165. It's the highest my dehydrator can
exactly.
go, and I don't go until I've subjectively decided it's just barely crispy enough. That shit runs all night. My shit is beyond dry,
Yeah,
and I harvest it
crap.
immediately. And I harvest immediately, I dry immediately. The very next morning, I get up early. I take them out. They immediately either go into jars that is then vacuum. All the air is sucked out of it with desiccant packs, or it immediately gets vacuum sealed if it's not pretty fruit and stored. And from what I've been told, that should easily last 2, maybe even 3
Yeah.
years.
Exactly. I before I even turn the dryer off, I have this box ready and open. See, it's got these seals on the
Yep.
top, those little snaps, and in the bottom, it's got the
Like yeah.
silica gel. Yeah, it's the color changing silica gel, which is
Hmm.
like, I don't know, like $5 a pound, but you
Yeah.
can regenerate it. Like,
Yep.
so once it starts
Microwave
to
it.
go like a pink, yep, exactly. It'll
Yep.
pop a little bit like if you've got a dehydrator, you can just dehydrate it again.
Right. For sure.
Let it sit on there for a day or two, and this literally like this box here, they cost about $3 a piece, and that can fit you probably fit 300-400 grams in there,
Yeah.
which is enough for a little while.
Yeah.
And these things are brilliant, and you can move them quite easily. And you put a little label on them if you're OCD
Well,
and
you were
all
the
that.
first person to say, why are you vacuuming out the air in your jars? You could just put a little, like some oxygen pack or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, they sell them on. They're like for those prepper people when they're trying to
Okay.
store like grain for the zombie apocalypse or whatever. They'll
Right.
throw in these. They've got calculations. You can buy different ones, big ones, small ones, when you get them. But what I've found is if these silica gel things, it's the moisture. People don't
Right.
understand that wet, moist things rot.
Is the worst. Yeah.
Like if you've ever been a backpacker or a hiker, the worst thing that can happen to your food supply is for it to get wet,
Right.
right? Because number one, it's heavy, and number two, it starts to
It's
rot,
gonna rot and
right?
mold and
Yeah.
yeah, immediately. Yep.
So if you throw in a half dry mushroom, even if it's in silica, and you throw a half moist mushroom in there, it's gonna rot.
Right.
And you can usually tell from the smell. But so like I see things here that are like, why are you possibly eating this? And God forbid somebody's like making a profit off it. This is garbage. This
Right.
is like literally like I wouldn't feed this to the squirrels. Like,
Not
and
my
let alone some.
squirrels.
Yeah, like I have a toy. Like literally, I even hate to say this is like blasphemy, but I throw a lot of things in the toilet bowl and they get flushed
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not gonna sell crap. Oh no,
Yep.
I mean give. I'm
You're
not
not
gonna give
giving the
people.
squirrels
I'm not
crap.
gonna exactly.
Yes.
They have very high standards that they're
They
used
do.
to, and
Yes.
they go in the toilet bowl. Like that's
Plus,
it,
once you
man.
get good at growing this stuff, I mean, come
Yeah.
on. What do you? I mean, I remember one time I took all my aborts and all my, and I extracted it, and I'm just like, then I did it, and I was like, okay, I don't need to do this again. They can just go in the garbage. I probably throw out, even with, even with the look of the fruit, I'm just like, nope. You know what? The
I
fuzzy
don't like
feet, those
that.
get cut off. I don't want to. I don't want to see those.
Oh, myco racism, myco
Yeah.
bigotry.
Yep.
Like you're not
Nope.
pretty enough. You're going in
Nope.
the toilet bowl.
Yeah.
Like I don't like you.
Well, one of the guys was asking about freeze drying the fruit. Now, I know I talked to George about this, and he said that short term, if you freeze dry versus air dry, heat dehydrate, that in the short immediate term, the freeze drying preserves the psilocybin better and it tests more potent in HPLC testing. He said long term, however, the air dry is superior. I don't know. He actually explained what he thought was
Ah.
happening, but do
I
you know
think I
about
can
this?
explain this. Yes,
Okay.
you're breaking the cells. Somebody was asking about ultrasonically cleaning the sclerotia. I don't think it's a good idea
No.
because it's kind of like when you wash eggs. You're breaking all this, well, not exactly the same, but you're breaking the cells on the surface, so it's going to oxidize everything that
Right.
gets the juice that comes out.
So it
So
looks
when you keep,
pretty short term, and
if you
right?
like blue, if you like blue color, I don't really like blue
Hmm.
fruits. They make nice
No, I
pictures,
see
but
that. I see
I
when
understand the
they look good.
chemistry of it. But I understand the chemistry of it, which I think like Miracalux has made several posts about it,
Yeah,
but
that's
people
great.
are so they don't like read the post. Like the blue color is the dimerization or polymerization of psilocin.
Right.
It's not available
You've
anymore.
wasted it. Right.
You've wasted it, yes. And I heard you mention this, and I don't want to get on a soapbox, but this is simple chemistry, you guys.
Yeah.
Oxidation is bad.
Right.
Like, so if you put an oxygen absorber in your potato chips or your crisp or your food, oxygen destroys molecules, free
Right.
radicals.
Yep.
Like we don't want oxygen, especially molecular or free radical oxygen in our bodies or any other product. Oxidation is bad. Rust, the
Yes.
oxidation of iron,
Right.
when oxygen and iron come together, it turns into rust. Rust is bad. The same way as like psilocybin that's turned oxidized and become a polymer and it's got a blue color, that's bad. It's really
Right.
actually bad. And if you give somebody a brown fruit and you're thinking, I still in the back of my head after decades of hearing this myth, wow, that's just a normal brown fruit. It's not blues. And then I give them to people and they're like, oh my God, what was that?
Right.
Like they're just like, wow, what? Like it's like a brown little crusty, like looks like some
Right.
just normal innocuous
Well,
thing.
so one
But
thing
it,
you do that I have never seen anyone do, and I thought, of course, Ed the chemist thinks like this. It's like 50% like old Michigan dad like logic, and then 50% chemistry logic. But Ed will actually dry and store his fruit with a little bit of he does not damage the base of the stipe. Like what is it called? The vulva or what is the bottom of the
not
fruit?
just the base, I think.
Okay.
Uh,
Does
we don't have vulvas.
there's no
Technically, we
vulvas
don't.
on the
There's
cubes,
no
right?
vulvas in
So it's
us.
just the
Yeah,
base of the stipe.
this the base.
Um,
Yeah.
he leaves that intact because his belief is that the minute you cut it, you have all that fibrous tissue that's allowing air in there. Which I was like, dude, you're probably right. I have not yet adopted this methodology because I have a
But
weird phobia of dirt, so
yeah, well,
can't do
that's
it.
what these are great. They're for camera equipment
Mm-hmm.
basically, and they have like a little grate. I don't know if these are, but they have different kinds. The quar will fall down, and then after
Oh,
maybe
cool.
2 or 3 rounds, you just kind of give it a shake and like pan in for gold.
Mm-hmm.
The silica will roll right off the top.
Nice.
The other thing is, to be honest, if you're harvesting like 5 tubs a night, you don't really have time to maybe be like the rip
Right.
and twist. Like so, I mean, there's been times where I'm just like ripping off like clumps and like putting them on the dryer, and I've got like a crazy like industrial size dryer thing that like
Right.
you could probably make like salami in it, but
Yeah,
so
I
I
keep
it's
telling
maybe a
myself I'm gonna make some beef jerky, but it hasn't happened yet.
yeah, beef jerky, dried bananas. Bananas here are great, and you dry them out. Oh
Ooh.
my gosh, cheapest like snack food you could, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like so full of potassium and whatever.
They do have
But but
potassium, yes.
everybody's got their own preservation things. I get a little frustrated. The number one thing is oxidation. We
I
do
agree.
not want to oxidize our fruits. Like oxygen is the nemesis of every biological process, except for breathing. But we have methods to deal with molecular oxygen,
Right.
but you shouldn't like have it like exposed to your fruits. Like oxygen is bad, except for, if you're
Yep.
breathing
I
like
mean,
us.
so to go along that, okay, we're coming up at 3 hours, so
Okay.
we're
Yeah,
we're gonna end
we can.
soon. But to kind of piggyback what you're talking about, the same goes for, like, I think I've given away, I don't know, I think I'm pretty close to 700 swab sets at this point. And I don't think I've had a single person ever tell me that any of my swabs were contaminated. And all I do is I don't touch the places I swab. I swab immediately from the tub. I do it in front of flow hood. If you don't have a flow hood, maybe you'd have a tougher time. Um, but so when people say that, I go, of course there should be no, right? I didn't get them out in the wild. They're in a tub. Like,
Yeah.
where is the contamination going to come from? So,
No, exactly. I don't think you even need need a flow hood. What you want to make sure is you don't get substrate. Like if you're picking a mushroom and swab it, I see
right.
people like manhandling it,
Yep.
and that's the only time I will cut off the base. If I'm going to make swabs, I'll cut off the base in the tub, and
Mm-hmm.
don't, most contamination, whether it's COVID or spore swabs, comes from contact.
Of
So
course.
don't try to get everything ready if you're going to make swabs, cut open your packages, get them ready, like kind of have them inching out of
Yep.
the pack and just go like if you can straight from the tub to swabbing and do
Yep.
it aseptically as possible. Don't like sit it down and go get
Right.
a tea or coffee or whatever and like swab it then right then. Do it.
Right.
Like
Yep.
just get it over with. Don't like let a fruit sit on your kitchen table for like 45 minutes before you
Yep.
swab it. That's a bad idea. And bacteria are everywhere, as you know. So if you're
Everywhere.
gonna swab fruits that I had an ODPE fruit. It was an albino. It kind of broke my heart.
Ooh.
I had a really nice. I got another one popping up though. No worries. There was an ODPE fruit that I misted too much, and I was gonna swab it because it's an albino, and I picked it this morning when you guys were talking, and it was just too far gone. It
Right.
was too soft, and it went in the toilet bowl. So
Yep.
I hate to say it, but I just threw an albino ODPE like in my toilet bowl because I'm like, I'm not gonna swab this. This is stupid because I'm gonna be dealing with this bacteria, and I'll just wait for the other one to pop up. And if not, that's the way it goes, man. Like I cloned it already too anyway, so it doesn't matter. But
It's gotta, what is meant to be will be.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. I got a fully functioning clone of it already, so it's all good. But if I could get some like albino like, ODPE swabs, that'd be pretty cool.
Yep.
But yeah, you just gotta roll with it. But these things about like I hate to say it, I got in a little maybe interjected myself into a flame war about swabbing yesterday. Like these people were saying about I want swabs that are really dark colored. And
Oh, I
did you see
lightly
that?
interjected me. Yeah, he's
Ah,
actually in our
yeah, yeah.
little. He's in our little grow, in our grow group. And I asked him. I was like, "Well, what variety was that?" Because I
Mm,
think my initial thought was, well, there are some that, man, you got to be pretty delicate with, so you're just really
yeah.
not going to get a lot. But he said no. He goes, I'm not going to out whoever it was. But he goes, it was a spore dropper. It should have had way more spores on it. So I don't know what it is. It's all good. But yeah,
It
people get
really
that
did.
way.
It's experience, I just swabbed a Choco Tat too while you guys were Choco Tot or Tat or whatever. And that thing,
Choco
man, you
tat.
just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Choco Tat, you just take a swab and just graze the thing and the thing's black.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, an albino that's got like translucent spores. I had to look under the microscope.
Just to
The
see.
first, I think it was a TAM that I swabbed and then eventually got monos from, and I was like, I don't know if there's spores there. So I don't want to proceed if it's just a blue, like,
Yeah.
skid mark on a swab if there's no spores. And then
Yeah.
when I actually took it and actually like streaked it and I did the spore dilution, there was too many spores. But the swab was barely had this hint of blue on it. But I just did sort of like almost like with a fingertip, like, "Choo," and like, if you see those girls like
Right.
doing their eyebrow thing, that like, woo,
Yeah.
like what do they got, the pilling, that kind of thing. Like, but there was spores there, but I have a microscope, so
Right.
I
Yeah. I
understand like
mean,
that too.
my whole I was over at a buddy's house, and fixing his microscope, and I said, "Hey, grab a swab. We're gonna look for spores. I'll show you what it looks like." And we couldn't find them, but it looked like there's gonna be a bunch of them because it was blue and dark and looked like there should be. And
Exactly.
there were absolutely none. And I can't remember what the variety was, but I think it was one where it was probably likely that there were actually no spores on it. So anybody that vends spore swabs, it's easy for prints because when you pick it up, you see the
it.
print and but if you're vending swabs,
Oh my God, dude.
you really, for me to go into our little ethics here, you gotta have a microscope. You gotta verify their spores.
Exactly.
You got
Dude, I was working with a Yeti swab, supposedly 2 Yeti swabs that I worked with for months, and I was doing dilutions and trying to get something to grow. And then I finally was like, I'm going to look under the microscope.
Nothing.
Not a single freaking spore.
Yeah,
And
a lot of those
I literally
albinos do that.
well, the swabs were like black. They had oxidized.
Right.
And they went from they were like a light blue to almost like a deep violet black color. And I'm like, there's got to be spores. My friend wasted 2 months. I wasted like 3 months because this was years ago when it was really hard to get stuff. And like we collectively wasted like 5 months trying to isolate from a swab that it was 2 sets of swabs that had no freaking spores on it. Right. And we're both like, that is when I realized like, oh my gosh, translucent spores don't have color. So a colored swab means jack freaking crap.
Jack shit. Yep.
Yeah, a colored, like I could wipe my ass with a swab. That doesn't mean it's got spores on it. Like just because it's dark.
I don't buy brown swabs as a general.
No, but Golden Halo, man, Golden Halo, and some of the new Ron Jeremy's, they're kind of brown.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Kind of fits with the cultigen.
Yeah. Yeah, we won't go there.
No, it's not.
Wait, how's the tip of those Ron Jeremy swabs look?
Ethics is this. I try not to get that close to it. It's dangerous.
But a lot of people are like, microscope. All you gotta do is learn how to look at some spores. That's all you gotta do.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Dave does it. Ed does it. I do it. Anybody that, if you own a flow hood, should own a microscope.
If you for $250, and you can, if you got kids, man, go out, get pond water and show them what's in pond water. Look at pollen. Pollen under the microscope is fascinating. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing like 200 swabs and you might think that maybe I did them a day early, like the iceberg I've got. You saw pictures on the grow along. The things are like, one of them's like bigger than my fist. And I've been just take a half a cotton bud that like are cheaper than swabs. Yeah. I've been looking for spores, and I pulled off a little gill tissue and I saw basidia. So maybe like another day or two, I'm gonna check it right now.
Dude,
but the gills
hope you get it.
I know there's some of them there like SoCal, whatever, Missy Michael SoCal or whatever. Yeah, Miss Mush SoCal. Mm-hmm. She was saying she got a couple spores, and I'm hoping maybe just a few. But somebody mentioned you can pipette sterile water, and I think it might have been Dave about pipetting sterile water into the gill folds.
Oh no, that was Qbert.
Yeah.
Qbert
Yeah. That's right. That was him. I might try that if it won't give me a swab that I can like dilute.
I had the same problem with the icebergs. That was one of my first ones where I was like, I am gonna every day look at gill under the scope. I'm gonna find a spore. I did it, I think 5 days, and then I was like, okay, yeah, the fruit are starting to deteriorate. I wasted my whole bag just doing this, and
I think I might have one more day. Yeah. They're getting pretty ripe.
Yeah.
There's no smell or anything, but it's like
I don't know why the albinos do that, but a lot of them just don't have it.
They just want us to make it harder.
Another one was it wasn't SV10, it was what was it called? Something like Quinapino or something like that. I'm saying it wrong, but yeah, another variety that I thought, oh cool, I'm gonna get spores off this. Nope, no spores.
Yeah, well, you can just clone. That's when you always like, Yeah, the cloning and the storage, water storage
Hmm.
too. That's another whole probably
Right.
storage, long-term storage. That's another issue.
We'll talk about that one too.
Yeah, we go.
But yeah, guys, if you're buying spore swabs for microscopy purposes only, wouldn't hurt to own a
Oh yeah,
microscope. It's for no other
yeah.
reason. Then you go, but no, I have this for microscopy purposes. Oh, you do? Where is your microscope? Just get a freaking microscope.
Yeah, that would be a good point, and it makes you look more legit too. Like when my landlord, I've got like a microscope set up in my living room. He'll be like,
Hmm.
look, some weird white dude crap. Like, I don't know. I got like an FFU and like a microscope sitting in my
Yeah.
living room. All the other stuff would look very suspicious, but when he sees the microscope, it'd be like, oh, science.
Yeah.
Yeah, science. Like, so the like 1 liter Erlenmeyer flask that looked like a meth lab won't be so weird
Right.
when he sees the microscope and the FFU.
Yeah,
But yeah, there's all.
the minute you got the mantle and the sock slit and yeah, all that stuff, it starts to look real chemistry, like shady chemistry for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's the stuff you don't want. But microscopes, what cost about 250 now, something like that?
Yeah, man, if you're on eBay, you can
260.
get them for, it's probably the smartest just to buy the AM scope for $250. You're done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, guy here got one. He's loving it. You do have to like adjust the oculars. They need to be the set screws need to be adjusted a bit.
yeah,
But he's got it dialed in. It's better than my Olympus, which probably costs like 4 times more. But I got it
yeah,
for a discount. But he's got one of those AM scopes, and he was like, "Oh, what's wrong with it?" I think you might have had trouble too. That it wasn't quite aligned with all the
yeah, and
optics.
it's still not perfect, but it works.
Mm.
It works
He's
for
got his
whatever I need it
dialed.
for.
He's got his dialed straight in, man. It looks better
Nice.
than my Olympus. But
No,
anything
I
that you
still
can
have
just,
some between my Nikon. I think the Nikon's the optics are superior. There's less. I don't know if it's aberration or what the optical
mm,
term is, but it's a little not vignetting. I forget what the term is,
yeah, yeah, I know what you mean.
but there's almost like
Chromatic aberration is the
yes,
correct
yeah.
term, I believe.
There was a little bit more of that. Is it enough to I'm not trying to
Yeah,
if I was trying to have all my pictures be on Wikipedia or if I
no.
was publishing, then I would I'd just be buying a a BX51 or I'd buy some fancy like a DIC or I'd buy a Eclipse E800. See that guys that just rule. Ed, you're not the only one who can throw fancy terminology around. I just rolled off
All that-
some fucking microscope names
I
like
know.
that, dude.
But do you know what DIC stands for? It's good to see the doctor
Dude,
struggle with some of those acronyms too. I'm
dude,
like, I was looking at them last night, like, what
yeah.
the hell is that
The
mean?
acronyms never end in our world now. Everything is an
SERT.
acronym now.
I know, I got to keep up, man. These young kids are like I don't do Twitter, but
Dude,
some of the
all you
other
know, let
social
me just
media.
tell you right now, for a doctor, if a doctor has to pause before he says a term,
I know.
that is a freaking brand new term that not a lot of people on earth are saying. That is for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if it's a neurosurgeon or whatever. It's like that's probably a very
Yeah.
specialized group of people.
Yeah. They're not the they're not at the bottom of the graduating class. Let me just
Yeah,
put it that
yeah.
way. Usually pretty high up.
Yeah, he seemed pretty normal. That's the other strange thing about like you meet some of these people, you're like, oh, they seem like normal people. I think we're all fairly normal. We just like maybe think we're not.
Yeah.
Well, I
Well,
don't know.
we're
Maybe I
he's
just
one
think
of
I'm
us
normal.
too, so that helps.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, man. That camaraderie is nice.
Yeah. So a few before I go, there's a little discuss. We'll definitely once we get through some of the barcoding stuff, maybe we will get into just some basics about the microscope. I actually have one with a camera on it, so maybe I can take some
Mm,
footage that we can pull up and discuss and definitely noticing more people hunting for clamp connections on my Discord.
mm,
So there are more people buying scopes, more people trying to use them.
yeah.
Definitely, you just got to have that time with it. Just keep farting around. Qbert, me, Ed, we're all on the Discord. So if you have questions, somebody will be there willing to help out. There's a few other guys that really know what they're doing. There's some new European guys that just joined that now seem to really know a lot
Mm,
about scopes. So I mean, we have like 5 or 6 guys that can definitely answer your scope questions. You'll be good. But basically, go buy that AmScope B120. If you want to splurge, get a trinocular head so that you can add a camera to it, right away or later, and you're good. You'll be, for any, like Ed said to me, he goes, for what we're doing, if it can go to 400x and the parts, it does the functional things it's supposed to do, you'll probably be all right.
1000x for spores though. You want 1000x for spores.
To measure
If you're
the
gonna,
spores.
yeah, you can
Right.
see them at 400x, but if you want to measure them, like so,
But I mean, most cube people are probably not
yeah.
needing to measure. But
If you
it
get
doesn't
into
matter, dude.
fields,
The B120 has the 100x, so you're good.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you're
exactly.
good.
I think most standard compound scopes have 100x, which will be 1000 with the
Yeah.
ocular.
Yep.
And the ones they sell now, I think have a 25x ocular, so it's actually 2500x.
Yeah.
But also, if you go into field, if you want to use the microscope for identifying mushrooms that you find out in the woods, you'll probably have to measure stuff.
Right.
So if you can get one that has a 1000x is the kind of like the standard
Right.
measuring. And,
Yep.
so
And then
yeah.
the only thing I don't have yet is one of them little stereoscopes, which wouldn't be the worst thing. The problem is to get at the power that I want. They're too much money. I still haven't pulled the
Yeah,
trigger on that.
they're a little bit overrated for what they are. You rarely, unless you're going to look at insects or something like that, or actual flowers, for mycology, a stereoscope isn't really necessary.
Right.
Anything you want to look at is going to be under the compound microscope. So the macroscopic field characters, like say adnext or adnate gills or free gills, you can just see that with your eye
Just
or
see it.
a magnifying glass. You don't really need a stereoscope for mycology. They always say you need both. That's kind of not true. You don't really
Yeah.
need
Okay.
a stereoscope. The
Good.
binocular
One less thing I gotta
stereoscopes.
buy.
That you don't buy it. If you've got extra money, buy a better compound
Right.
microscope, like the old school ones with the little turret.
Right.
That like get better optics, and generally scopes are all the same. It's the optics that get better. It's just like camera lenses. You
Yeah.
buy a
The
camera lens, it's
bodies
like,
doesn't
yeah.
matter that
Well, the
much. Yeah.
lenses, you get a Leica lens or you can get like a cheap Nikon.
Right.
But you're talking about like a f5.6 or a nice giant Leica lens that, is for old school, like large format, that's like a chunk of glass, they'd put in like a telescope or like one of those
Yeah.
things they send up into space. There's different price ranges. Glass gets like exponentially more expensive the larger it gets.
Oh yeah, dude! I almost bought a Nikon E800 DIC. It was fully set up, and I was gonna get it for under $1,000. Another one. I know I missed that one, but there was another one that came up, and I was gonna get this one. Only this one, I'm really killing myself. I didn't get that first one for $800 because it had 3 objectives. It had like the appropriate objectives, like E-plano. I forget what it's called. It's
Yeah,
like
they got more
E65.
acronyms.
There's like Nikon had a specific name for them. And of course they didn't work on the next generation because
Yeah,
that's what they
the
do.
threads were wrong.
They do all that stuff. But
It's like
the new
phone
one
chargers.
that I was convinced I was going to win had no objectives. So I started looking up how much the objectives were going to cost. It was going to be $1,000 a piece.
Yeah,
I'm like,
uh-huh.
oh my god, I wish now
For
I.
one.
Oh yeah, for literally one. The 4X
Oh,
was $800.
yeah, some of the ones for fluorescent microscopy, you're getting
Oh
up
yeah,
into several grand for like a
yep,
single objective
yep,
because it has to be special glass to transmit the
yep,
fluorescence and all that.
yep.
The
The
UV or
optics
whatever the
get
hell it
super
is.
sophisticated.
Yeah.
Yeah, real fast.
Yeah, again, it's like a point and shoot versus like a high-end, like, large format camera.
Yeah,
Like you're taking like $500 or like 60,000. Like
yep.
that's why photographers and people used to always, get a lot of trim. When you got a
Sure.
$60,000 camera, you don't need the Ferrari.
You know what they say about a guy with a big lens.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know.
On that note,
I've only had small lenses.
yeah. On that note, all right, guys. Well, we definitely went long.
Or
We didn't lose. We only lost like 20 people. We didn't do too bad. Um, Yes, Phil Aaron, people do rent cameras. Actually, I have a friend who's like super high level photographer, and he doesn't buy anything. He just makes the
Uh,
person that hires him pay for all his rental fees. So he
yeah,
gets
that's
to
a
use
good
whatever he
idea.
wants.
Yeah.
Way to do it. So
I
next
could.
week, we got Microdex Mushrooms coming on. Shay of Microdex Mushrooms. We got who else do we got? Why am I drawing a blank? We have James Cruz coming on talking about Lucid Gates and some of his other creations on Behind the Veil. I think we'll probably have both of those guys talking on the ethics segment, and then we're going to continue our quest of sequencing, aligning, and looking at chromatograms, and hopefully Ed can give us a little more nuanced understanding of that stuff. And then onward and upward, guys. Until next week, take care. Hope you guys have a good weekend.
All right, see you guys. I'll why like Rick did.
Yeah.
See ya.